Sejam todos bem-vindos à FGV. Seu evento vai começar em instantes. Antes do início, por favor, pedimos para que se atentem às orientações a seguir. Lembrem-se de colocar seus celulares e equipamentos eletrônicos no modo silencioso. Não é permitido que sejam consumidos alimentos e nem bebidas no interior do auditório. O limite máximo de público é de 315 pessoas. Este auditório possui lugares reservados para cadeirantes e para pessoas com deficiência auditiva e visual. É proibido fumar em todos os ambientes da FGV, de acordo com a Lei Federal nº 12.546 de 2011. Em caso de falta de energia, as luzes de emergência acenderão automaticamente. O espaço possui saídas de emergência sinalizadas, com portas corta-fogo equipadas com barras antipânico, que possibilitam a saída do local com segurança. Para abrir a porta, basta empurrar a barra. Este ambiente conta com equipamentos de prevenção e combate a incêndio, como detectores de fumaça, sprinklers, extintores e hidrantes. Em caso de emergência, a brigada de incêndio será acionada para ajudar. Siga as orientações da brigada de incêndio. Ao ouvir os alarmes ou mensagens de emergência, mantenha a calma, evite pânico e confusão. Em caso de incêndio, não use o elevador, desça pelas escadas de emergência. Para maior segurança, este auditório é monitorado por circuito fechado de TV. Antes de sair, confira seus pertences para não deixar nada para trás. A FGV não se responsabiliza por objetos deixados ou esquecidos nos auditórios ou em suas dependências.
Antes de darmos início ao evento, gostaríamos de reforçar o seguinte disclaimer. As manifestações expressas por integrantes dos quadros da Fundação Getúlio Vargas e por convidados que participam dos eventos e transmissões online representam exclusivamente as opiniões dos seus autores e não refletem, necessariamente, a posição institucional da FGV. Este evento poderá coletar seus dados pessoais e registrar sua imagem e voz por meio de vídeos, respeitando as leis aplicáveis. Você poderá deixar de participar do evento. Em caso de dúvidas, entre em contato com a FGV pela aba de proteção de dados no portal.fgv.br. Agradecemos sua participação e desejamos um excelente evento.
We are ready to reconvene and start the afternoon sessions. So now in the afternoon we'll have 3 papers presented. The presenters will be Rodrigo O.Leite from Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, Andrei Musalem from Universidad de Chile, and Andrei Hagiu from Boston University. Okay, so we are ready to start. Rodrigo, take it away, please.
So thank you very much for the opportunity to present this paper here. Wait a little bit for the paper to show slides. Yeah, now, so this is the title of the paper. The real effects of fintech in an emerging market, instant digital payments and firm creation. It's a paper that the authors are me, Laila, and Mateus, who is a professor also at Rio de Janeiro EBAPE, FGV. So the idea here is that this paper talks about fast payment systems. Okay, they are, as the name says, they are fast. Okay, so they are instantaneous and they are low cost. Okay, and they provide financial inclusion for these for individuals that otherwise could not access other types of money transmission. Okay, and you have a long literature showing that financial development is a driver of firm creation. Okay, but do not know if this type of technology can improve entrepreneurial activity. Okay, so what do you use to test this setting? Use PIX. That's a nationwide instant payment platform launched by the Brazilian Central Bank in August of 2020. So in August 2020, it's launched, and then you could start set up your keys, and then in November, you could start transacting. Okay, it's free for individuals. There is very low fees for business, and for small businesses, it's also free. And it's mandatory adherence for financial institutions. By 2024, already 26 trillion reais was transacted for using this technology. It's about 4.5 trillion USD at the time. And with over 500 million registered accounts. So we have, you can see by that number that we have, on average, more than 2 keys per individual in Brazil. So we have multiple keys, okay, because you can set up multiple keys for multiple banks, so that there's a very large adoption. Okay, it reduces transaction costs, okay, because now it's free to receive money. You don't need to have received by credit card, by debit card, okay, and it improves cash flow management. Why? Because with a credit card or a debit card, you have to wait a little bit to receive the money, okay, up to 30 days. Now it's instantaneous, okay. So it's free and instantaneous, so it reduces these frictions, and it should improve access for small firms, to improve the ability of people to create small businesses. So let's see if this is the case, okay? And to our knowledge, no study examines this impact, the impact of PIX or any digital payment system on entrepreneurship, okay? And then here, this is one thing that we try to differentiate in the paper, okay? So it can either, because this effect could either be because there is lower transaction costs, okay? So you diminish the financial frictions, and therefore it's easier for firms to enter the market, okay? But now people should also be able to spend more, because there is this famous paper here in marketing that shows that people spend more with credit cards and digital forms of payment than with money. So if now more people can pay digitally, maybe they spend more money. So here we are trying to look at the first one, about transaction costs. So our identification strategy looks at this first mechanism, okay? So does the introduction of digital payments increase firm creation in Brazilian municipalities? So take a look at the municipality level in Brazil, okay, from 2017 to 2024. We get data from the Ministry of Labor, we get from the number of firms per municipality. And why the Ministry of Labor? Because now we know how many people this firm employs. So we can know if it's a small firm with no employee or one employee, or it's a large firm with hundreds of employees. So now we can also look at firm size, and that's important for one of our tests. Data from the Central Bank of Brazil with PIX transaction volumes and the number of bank branches in the municipality. This is important also for identification strategy. And data from the institute, the IBGE, it looks at the population, municipal GDP per capita, and governmental transfers. This is important because we need to be sure that in our definitive scenario, municipalities are comparable. So what we do is that we do propensity score matching before the definitive. And I'll show it later. Okay, so this is it. So we do a difference with propensity score match. What we exploit, cross-municipality variation in pre-existing banking infrastructure. So there are municipalities with very few bank branches, 0 bank branches, 1 bank branch in the municipality. So there is much financial friction there. But there is also municipalities with many banks present. So when you have the shock of PIX, okay, the lowering of financial friction should be in where there is financial frictions, in these municipalities. So these municipalities are treated. And the untreated ones is the one that had no no financial frictions ex ante. Okay, that's municipalities with more than, in our case, 1 bank branch, so 2, 3, 4. But the problem there is that these municipalities, they are different between them. Okay, a municipality with 100 bank branches is completely different from one with 0. So what to do is do a propensity score matching to ensure that they are balanced beforehand, and that together with the parallel trends should be enough for us to claim causality here. Okay. So what do we find? We find that the number of firms in underbanked municipality, it increases by 2.6% after peaks. So we show that here, this is the causal coefficient. So what we argue here is that peaks increased from creation by 2.6%. Okay. The effect is concentrated in municipalities with high peaks adoption. Okay. So in municipalities with low peaks adoption, there is no effect. But municipalities with high peaks adoption is about 5% increase. Okay. And we show that the effect is concentrated also in small firms. So firms that are small, we see an increase. Okay. So the increase of the creation of small firms. But firms that are large, see no effect there. It shouldn't be an effect there because these firms should face very few financial frictions. And one point that's a kind of a confounding, because if you look at this date here, go back, August 2020. So it was right in the start of COVID. So you have that problem, that collinearity of COVID. So what a different story here could be what? It's not about peaks. Okay. We are looking here peaks introduction, but in the same time that peaks introduction happened, you had conditional cash transfers for people during COVID. So we have stimulus checks given to people. So now I'm not looking at that. Talk about liquidity. There's liquidity in the market, and then more firms appear because people now have more money to spend. But here, what we do is that we separate. We look at municipalities with high levels of stimulus checks and municipalities with low levels of stimulus checks, okay, given by the federal government. And you see that the estimate is very similar. And that should be because we're matching. So the stimulus checks, they're based on the poverty of the city, number of workers, etc. That is what the government is looking when giving stimulus checks in Brazil. But if we are matched, then control and treatment, they are similar in these characteristics. It should not affect. Okay? But it could be an explanation. We test and we find that that's not an explanation. Okay? Okay. So let me skip here the literature in sake of time. Let's talk about the empirical strategy. Okay? So we take look at highs. That's the data set from the Ministry of Labor and Employment. Take a number of firms per municipality, and then we segregate by firm size in additional analysis. Okay, and we look at the number of PIX transactions, income and outgoing at the municipality level, and the number of bank branches per municipality. Okay, and in municipality level data, we get population, government transfers, and GDP per capita for matching. So here we look at the descriptive statistics. If you look here, especially here, look here, the median of the number of bank branches, 0. Means that, so here about 62.6% of municipality urban surveys, you have either 0 or 1 bank branch in 2020. So you see that financial frictions, they are very binding in Brazil. Okay, before in the introduction of these types of fintech and fast payment systems. Okay, why? Because we had a very low level of dispersion of banking activity in Brazil. Okay, despite the median population being about 20,000 people, so we have municipalities with tens of thousands of people with either 0 or 1 bank branch. So we see that it's not about a municipality of 500 people, large municipalities. So let's look at the empirical strategy. So this is kind of the baseline specification. Look at the log of the number of firms in the municipality. It is the defined here variable plus municipality fixed effects. Okay. And here, what we do is that before doing this, okay, Here we have, this is a dummy low bank infrastructure, so municipalities that had either 0 or 1 bank branch, it's going to be 1, and 0 if they have more than 2 bank branches. The problem is that this is correlated with lots of stuff. So what we do, we do a propensity score matching, okay? So that we do this regression here, okay, on the matched municipalities. Okay, so we compare municipalities with similar levels of cash transfers, with similar size, and with similar GDPs. Okay, so we have a balanced control and treatment. Okay, and you look here. So this is the balance test. So if you look here, before I do the matching, the log of firms for the control group is 8, and the log of firms for the treatment was 6, much smaller, of course, because smaller, the municipalities with a lower number of bank branches should be municipalities with lower levels of economic development. Okay, but then if we do the control when you do after the propensity score matching, we see here they are very similar. Okay, so ex ante, these are similar municipalities in the levels of firms. Okay, and also we use this variable here, PIX-use. Okay, PIX-use is PIX payments received by individuals divided by the population, and then you take a log of that to avoid outliers. And if frictions drive the effects to be strong where PIX adoption is higher. That's how we test our mechanism. Okay, and we also look at firm size heterogeneity, look at small firms, less than 10 employees, or large firms, 100 or more employees. And you also separate them by the COVID stimulus checks. So we split sample by the tertiles of emergency stimulus checks per capita. Okay, so to see if the coefficient is dependent on that. So our main findings, so here, you can look at the pre-treatment, so we see here. And then afterwards, you see here a larger increase here. You can see it here. In the linear trends model, see that the treatment increases more. And if you look at the leads and lags, see here the parallel trends. 2020, you have here a small shock because of the pandemic, but afterwards you see here this positive effect of peaks growing over time. Okay, so if you look at the estimate, okay, it's about 2.6%. So that's our estimate. That is this effect here, 2.6% per year. And if you look separate by the PIX adoption, okay, we look here, this is low PIX adoption and high PIX adoption. Municipalities, see here that in the one that didn't use PIX that much, the result was 0. Here, with high PIX adoption, the result is 4.7%. Okay, so trying to show here the mechanism, evidence for the mechanism, that's PIX adoption. And here, for large firms, we find no effect. Okay, but for small firms, you see here, this is a very large effect. So about 19 log points, okay, increase. So we see here that this effect is because this here is the effect on the total number of firms. But here, look at the slice of the smallest firms. See that the effect is there for these small firms. That is where our theory should predict that the constraints are binding. Okay. And if you separate the diff in diff for municipalities with low levels of stimulus checks, okay, we get 4%, and with high level 3.9%. So this is very similar. That's what we should expect if our matching did a good balance, because then treatment and control in both scenarios should receive more or less the same amount of stimulus checks, and it should balance out. And here we do a test to see if the balancing worked, and it seems to work. Okay. So here the discussion. So we had 2 different explanations. Okay. That should be friction reduction channel or a demand channel. Here we show evidence for this first one here. because the high PIX adoption is for small firms and for municipalities with this kind of binding banking infrastructure problems with 0-1 bank branches, okay? And we rule out alternative explanation of COVID-19 being the driver of that. That's the main problem with this specification. So the message of this paper is the introduction of fast payment systems that are low cost and that they are instantaneous, they can help firm creation, okay, in the underbanked municipalities. So that's a big problem in economic development. In economic development is you have these areas where you don't have financial services. How can you provide these people financial services so that they can improve their entrepreneurial activity? You have an idea of microfinance, okay? So we try to create credit products tailored for them, but you also have an idea of financial development, so trying to give them financial technology. Okay, so here we talk about financial technology. So if you give them financial technology, so now they make more firms, okay? The effects are concentrated where PIX adoption is high, and it's driven by small firms, not explained by COVID stimulus checks. In this sense, instant digital payments act as a real driver of entrepreneurship, not merely a financial inclusion tool. It lowers transaction costs and payments frictions for micro and small businesses, independent of and complementary to traditional bank infrastructure. And here, with this slide here, with that, I think my presentation comes to the end. I still have a few minutes. Here, a point is that I think some of you may question. It's about, okay, but is these firms that people decide to create firms, or they already have a side business that is informal and informalize it? Here we cannot say because we cannot observe what these people are doing previously to this. Okay, so we have trying to get the data where you can look if these people they are receiving PIX payments beforehand. Okay, because if they are receiving many payments before opening the firm, mean that they're already operating a side business, and now they decide to formalize. If not, they're creating a new business. Okay, so we're trying to see that, but here in this paper we cannot answer it. Okay, so this is one of the many. I think the main comment that we receive when we present this paper here is about: is this formalization of businesses, or is the creation of new businesses? Okay, here with that specification we cannot answer because we do not know what that people were doing before opening the business. Okay, it's a black box. So that's I think the main point of the paper, that the paper is lacking. But I think that the story about, even if we cannot differentiate between formalization and new firms, I think the story is good enough. Okay, there are new firms. Okay, the number of firms increase. I think that's a story that's important enough. Okay, and now the conclusion is 2.6% increase in the number of firms for the underbanked, consistent with the friction reduction channels, and it shows a real effect of fintech. So the point is, we get fintech, fintech is very good. Now people have access to this financial technology. So what? What are the real effects in the economy? So this is a paper that tries to answer that. So get a real effect. People open more firms because the central bank decided to give them this technology. Okay, so it is good from a theoretical perspective because it connects financial technology to the real economy. Also from a policy perspective to say, okay, if the government invests in this, does that translate into economic development? Should governments invest in this? And the point here that we say that, yes, okay, giving this access, this tool to people, this digital infrastructure, okay, makes people open more businesses, okay? So regulators and central banks in emerging markets can promote entrepreneurship and financial inclusion jointly by expanding low-cost, real-time digital payments infrastructure, especially in underbanked regions. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think this is super interesting. I was just wondering whether in your data set you are able to observe the types of the entrepreneurs, I mean, the new firms that are created. So I asked this question because I thought it might be interesting to look at the heterogeneity across the firms. So some firms might benefit more from instant payment than some others. I would be curious to see your data in a more detailed level and how across the board the effects can vary.
So in this data set here, derived by municipality not, but we have another data set that we can look at the individual firms, then we can. But I think that for very small businesses, there is, I think, a lot of concentration in services. Okay, and there is more heterogeneity the more you go across the size of the business. So, okay, then you get a store, then you get a factory. Okay, so but most of the very small businesses, they are either services, okay, or they are like it's still classified as a service, but something like catering, something like that. Okay, it's still a service, but to give you make food, etc. So you are making something, but it's still classified as a service. So we can take a look at it. But ex ante, my prior is that there is very few heterogeneity in the smallest firms. Okay, for larger firms, you have lots of heterogeneity, but for small, I don't think so. At least that's my prior.
Thank you.
It was the same question.
Ah, okay.
Thanks. It's a related question, but with just slightly different view. Given that the explanation comes from friction, different economic sectors face different frictions for the creation of firms. So it's different to create a mining company than an agricultural, than in tourism, than in commerce. So it's very related to what she just said. So the question is, one option is you could do matching. In the matching you are doing, you could do, given that you do not have individual firms data, you can still do matching on the fraction of economic sector of each municipality. You can do that in the same matching you are doing and see how the balance changes before the diff in diff. That's one option. And the other, if you want to explore the heterogeneity, even though you might not have data on the firms, again, you can use it as a control, the main sector or the two main sectors in each municipality, and see if the results are driven not only by small firms, but some economic sectors and the small firms in that sector. I think that will be a good way to approach it.
Yeah, because you have like certain municipalities in Brazil, they are known for certain things, okay? So maybe if we get municipality, then get more into heterogeneity and look at firms across the board. Okay. Yeah.
Great.
Great.
So if there is no more questions, let's applaud Rodrigo. Thanks for your presentation. And the next person is Andrei Musalem from the University of Chile. Andres.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you, Danny and Anthony and Fabio, for putting together this great conference. This is some work that I've been exploring with Michael Truso from the University of Maryland and former student Ricardo Tralma at the University of Chile. So I guess most of my work is on Bayesian econometrics, a little bit of work also the intersection between marketing and operations, and a little bit of game theory. This has nothing to do with that. So I guess what I wanted to do at some point in my life is to combine two of my passions, which are marketing and music. So this is my first shot at trying to write a paper about the music industry. So we'll see how it goes, and you can let me know. And also thank some of the people in the audience, because I know that some people have flights right after this session. So thank you for staying for this talk and for the other talks in this session. Okay. So let me start with a quote. It's a quote that says, "Remember that commercial success is completely out of your control." Okay. So who said this? It's actually Rick Rubin. And you may say, okay, so who is Rick Rubin? Anybody knows Rick Rubin in the audience? No? No? So Rick Rubin is actually a very famous producer. He has worked with, for example, Metallica, Lady Gaga, Red Hot Chili Peppers. I assume that you know Metallica, Lady Gaga, or Red Hot Chili Peppers, so maybe more than one of those. And this is mentioned in a book called The Creative Act, A Way of Being. And the reason I'm mentioning this, because I find it very disappointing, right? So it's saying like, there's not much you can do. This is pretty much out of your control. So we're gonna try to look more into this. And actually at the end of the presentation, if I have time, I'll show you another quote from Rick Rubin related to some of the findings that we get, okay? So let me begin with a simple question, which is, how do we learn about new music? And I can perhaps extrapolate a little bit from my own experience, like in the old days, maybe when I was in high school, how would I learn from new music? I think most of the time it would be from the radio. Maybe I would listen to 4 or 5 different radio stations, and sometimes the radio may decide to show you a new track, a new song, something you haven't heard before, and if you didn't like it, of course you can switch to the radio, but maybe in total there were like 4 or 5 different radio stations that I was listening to. So somehow I would encounter that new music anyway through the radio. Now, you could say, well, there was also MTV, and there were also some other options like maybe concerts and so on, but I think radio played a big role. Fast forward to 2026, and a lot of this has to do with streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music. And this is important because these digital platforms not only make music available, but also promote music. And when I say promote music, I say it because one of the important components of these digital platforms is the set of playlists that they offer to listeners. And some of those playlists are actually managed and created by the same platforms. And some of those playlists, managed and owned by those same platforms, can have millions of subscribers. So if all of a sudden a song gets selected into one of those playlists with massive numbers of subscribers, you're going to see a massive change in the numbers of streams, and of course in the number of people that would follow that artist, and so on. I also talk sometimes with my undergrads, with my students, and they tell me that they not only learn about new music from streaming platforms, that they also rely on TikTok. So I don't know if that is true here in Brazil, but at least my undergrads in Chile told me that TikTok is also one way in which they learn about new music, by the way. So what do we know about the changes in the era of streaming? So I want to try to talk about this from the perspective of the demand side, so we as listeners. The supply side, by that I mean the artists, the producers, the composers, and so on. And also from the perspective of promotion and distribution, which concerns a lot, has to do a lot with the streaming platforms, okay? So let me tell you a little bit about what we know about how the era of streaming has changed the industry. So there's this interesting paper from Dada, Knox, and Bronnenberg. George Knox was actually a classmate of me of mine in the PhD program. And they found that when people adopt streaming services for music, they end up listening to more music, they discover more new music, and they consume a greater variety of music. So I guess the idea was that in the old days, if you wanted to listen to more music, you would typically have to own those records, right? But now with the streaming platform, you have access to a huge ocean of infinite an infinite catalog of music, so you can jump from one artist to another artist, from one genre to another one very easily. You don't need to own anything at all, right? So their argument was that streaming is lowering the marginal cost of variety. So that's on the demand side. So let's move to the supply side. So if you look at the supply side, and by this I think about artists, I think about composers, I think about producers. Here's some results that were reported in a paper from 2018, and then later confirmed in another paper from 2024. They say that if you look at the way in which songs are being written, for example, the amount of instrumental time that happens right before you hear the singer, that amount of time has gone down by maybe 70 to 80%, from 23 seconds to 5 seconds. So now people are getting to the vocals much, much more quickly than it used to be. The second result is that songs are faster, so the tempo of the songs is much faster. The titles are shorter, and the time it takes you to listen to the title of the song within the lyrics is also going down, okay? And the explanation they give is that maybe these tendencies have something to do with quickly grabbing the attention of the listener, okay? You don't want to miss the opportunity that somebody would switch to another song, so then you do all of these changes. You get the vocals sooner, you get the tempo faster, you get shorter titles, and the title appears sooner within the lyrics, okay? And this was also confirmed later in another paper from 2024. And this is just anecdotal evidence. This is an interview that was done to Sting some time ago in 2021. So Sting said that in his opinion, this is of course no scientific at all, but in his opinion, the structure of the songs that we're listening, particularly the popular songs, is becoming simpler. So in the old days, or typically, you would have a structure with a verse, a chorus, maybe another verse, and then there was a section of a song that is typically called the bridge. So he gave this particular example. He said, well, maybe you can write a song about the fact that maybe your girlfriend left you. So in the verse, I would tell you what happened. I would tell you that maybe my girlfriend left me. When I get to the chorus, I will repeat to you that I'm super sad, I'm very depressed. In the second verse, I will keep talking about that, but then I'll get to the bridge. And Sting said that when you get to the bridge, that bridge is a different part of the song that maybe you change the scale, maybe you change the tempo, maybe you change the instruments. And that gives you an opportunity to provide a new way to spin the story. So maybe you can say, you know what, my girlfriend left me, but there are more things that I can do with my life. So maybe my life is not over. So according to Sting, he said, the bridge is a section that used to provide you with an opportunity for therapy, okay? And that's what he said. I didn't come up with this. I'm literally quoting Sting on this interview. But his point is that that section, the bridge, is pretty much gone from a lot of the popular music that we hear nowadays. Songs are much, much simpler nowadays, according to this observation, okay? And then let me get to the role of streaming platforms. As I said before, it's not only distribution, it's also promotion. So here we have a table. This is from our data set with different playlists. And I'm going to put in yellow the one that are actually owned by Spotify. And there's one column, the fourth column, that describes the average number of subscribers from the top 100 playlists within those categories. And you can see that in many cases, that can be in the range of millions of people, which is what I was saying before, that if all of a sudden a platform chooses to allocate a specific song within one of these playlists, that song is going to have an important impact. That placement is going to have an important impact on the commercial success of that song. Okay, and there are papers about this. There was some paper by Hagiu Wolf-Fogel showing that inclusion in this playlist can raise streams by 20 million weekly. There's another recent paper, a marketing paper, showing that playlist inclusion can boost the streams, not only during the period in which the song is on the playlist, but also a little bit afterwards as well. Okay. So with all of that, I just want to summarize what we think might be some interesting research gaps or some opportunities for the research. We think that there's a bit of a lack of a comprehensive analysis of what are the criteria that the streaming platforms are using to select these songs on these top playlists. There's been some work, also, for example, gender discrimination or maybe independent songs or not. There's also many papers have only looked already at popular songs, like songs that made it into Billboard, and that's already a subsample that it's a little bit biased in my opinion. Some papers have looked at music features of many of these tracks, but in my opinion, many of these papers sometimes they only focus on a subset, like maybe we're only going to look at the lyrics, or we're only going to look at the harmony, or maybe we're only going to look at the vocal melody, okay? And the last thing that I want to say is that I haven't seen much work on the dynamics. And what I mean by this is that songs look a lot like movies. So why do I say this? Because when you look at a new movie, the opening weekend is the most important weekend. That's when a movie is selling the most in terms of box office tickets. After that, most of the movies, not all, but most of them actually go down in terms of box office revenues, right? If you look at our data, we get exactly that same pattern, but not for every song. So we want to try to understand if there's some opportunities to understand what songs go beyond that declining pattern over here, okay? So questions. One, we want to study what we call the revealed curating preferences from these digital platforms in terms of musical features. We want to use a broad set. We want to incorporate different types of playlist. And given what we have seen in the literature, we want to particularly place emphasis on musical complexity, because these previous papers were saying that that music was getting simpler. So to what extent is that coming from the fact that maybe the platforms are pushing simpler music, or it's just that maybe that's simply what people are listening to, regardless of what the platforms are pushing that kind of content or not? We also want to study the mediating role of playlist placement or inclusion in the success of a song, and also look at dynamics. Now, in the interest of time, and because I don't have a lot of time, I'm only going to show results today for questions number 1 and 3, but I'll be happy to talk with you about some of the other question if you like during the break. So let me tell you about the data set we have. We wanted to build a proxy for the universe of songs that were released during a period of time. That's virtually impossible, but what we try to do is to rely on a project that is called Music Brains, in which people collaboratively uploaded information about songs. To say, look, here's this song by this artist, this is the title, it was uploaded, this is the release date, and so on. And for that, we also wanted to be able to obtain characteristics, music characteristics about those songs. So we were able to use the iTunes Search API to extract fragments of those songs. We don't have the full song, we only have 30 seconds of a song. Otherwise, this project would be much more expensive or it would be illegal. So one of the two, so we wanted to stay out of those two possibilities. And we also wanted to have information about the commercial success of the song and also about playlist inclusion. So we were able to buy some data from SoundCharts, okay? So with all that, we were able to get a sample of roughly 25,000 songs, a little bit less than 25,000 songs. And this is probably the part that took the most time in the project, which is to assemble the song features. We had more than 150 different music features that cover the vocal melody, the lyrics, the harmony, the rhythm. It also had background information like the artist's popularity for a song right before the release of that song. We have the genre of the song, label, and so on. And of course, we also have the streaming data and playlist inclusion data. So that's what we have. It took really a lot of time to assemble this analysis, okay? These are the playlists that we're going to be focusing on for the analysis. We're going to look at these 5 playlists mainly because they're some of the biggest types of playlists. The first 2 are editorial, which are managed by people working for Spotify. So an editor, someone, will receive submissions. I will select which songs to be added to a playlist. Algotorial combined, which is the second category, combines human judgment and algorithms. And then you have curators and listeners, which is from other people that are not affiliated with Spotify. You have charts, which depends on the performance of a song on a given chart, and then playlists that are constructed by major labels. Okay, so that's the focus that we have now of all of these variables that we have, and we have a lot. We have like 152 variables. We wanted to identify, and as I said before, we're placing emphasis on complexity. Which of these variables have something to do with complexity, and we identify either from previous literature or from our own evaluation of those variables. There were at least 37 variables that had something to do with musical complexity. To try to scale down a little bit the dimensionality of the data, we applied just a simple principal components analysis. We were able to bring this down to 12 components. Some of those components have to do with the lyrics. For example, how repetitive are the lyrics of a particular song. Some of them have to do with the harmony. By harmony, what I mean is the underlying chords that you hear within a song, like are you hearing C major, C minor, like what are the transitions that you're listening to? Things about the sound frequencies, so what type of instruments are you listening to within this particular song? Vocal pitch variability is an interesting variable that I'm going to describe a little bit later, so I'm going to skip that for a bit. Variables about the rhythm, so rhythm variability. About the dynamics, so is this a song that is always loud, or is transitioning between loud and quiet periods and so on? And then we had a couple of factors that we really couldn't combine with the other factors, that are these two, augmented chords and diminished chords, which have to do with the usage of very specific types of chords, okay? That maybe, I don't know if any of you has some knowledge about chords, but these are not the first chords that you would typically learn. I mean, if you start learning guitar, if you start learning how to play a keyboard, most of the time you will learn about maybe major chords and minor chords. Diminished chords and augmented chords are typically not among the first things that you would normally learn, okay? And just to illustrate that a little bit, so here I have a super quick example. Here's a major chord. So most people say that sounds kind of happy. Here's a minor chord. Some people say that sounds a little sad. And then you have a diminished. So that's a diminished chord. I don't know how that makes you feel, but some people would argue that the diminished chord would generate a certain feeling of tension, being a little bit, feeling of being unease, uncomfortable. And when that happens in music, typically that signals that tension, that uncomfortable feeling, you want it as a listener to get resolved, okay? So normally, when you encounter one of these chords, like diminished chords, typically after that comes something else, something simpler that lets you go back to a more comfortable state, okay? So this is just to give some quick background on the chords that we have here. So let me begin with some of the results. So the first analysis that we did is super simple. We're just predicting, I mean, really nothing in terms of the more difficult part of the paper was actually assembling the variables, but the analysis that I'm going to show are not very sophisticated. It's simply a logic model combined with lasso. And what we're doing here is just try to understand what are the variables that might be predictive of a song being picked up and selected into an editorial playlist, okay? And of course, the best predictor of a song being picked by editors from Spotify is prior popularity, right? Not surprisingly, if you're Taylor Swift, if you're Bruno Mars, if you're Lady Gaga, most likely you're going to have a bigger chance of being picked than if not. But we wanted to focus also on some of the complexity metrics, and we found, interestingly, that particular variable that I explained just in the previous slide, actually diminished chords, interestingly has some kind of effect, significant effect of being picked up. And there's another variable that also shows up here, which is the variability of the sound frequency. So whether the artist is employing multiple instruments, multiple sound frequencies when he's composing that particular song, okay? I'm very quickly going to show the results for the other types of playlists. For major label playlists, for curators, listeners, we also find similar results in the sense that prior popularity and diminished chords are predictive of being included in this playlist. For algotorial playlist, there is something quite interesting. There's a variable that I need to explain here. It's maybe not that intuitive. It's called vocal pitch transition. So what is that? It means how quickly the vocal melody will switch from one musical note into another musical note. Okay? If you're speaking, when we speak, those transitions tend to be fast. When we sing, those notes are sustained over time, so the transitions are a little bit less often observed, right? So what this was showing is that in the case of songs that have a lot of transitions, that are more consistent with the speech, like rap and hip hop, they will be less likely to be considered for this algotorial playlist. Okay? Let me quickly go into streaming dynamics. We look at all of the songs that we have, the 25,000 songs, and we did a time series clustering analysis of the 4 types of songs, of all the songs, and we found 4 clusters. But if you look at the 4 clusters, like the first 3, they have something in common, which is that all of them have a declining pattern. It's just like a movie, right? So you have maybe the next, like the next Spider-Man movie, right? It becomes super popular on opening weekend, and then slowly it starts to decline. And that thing happens for like 90% of the songs, actually 92.3% of the songs in our data. But there's one cluster, the one at the bottom right, in which you see a more sustained commercial success. Okay? They start a little high, but then they're able to sustain that, that level of success. So one thing that we did was, once again, see if we could understand what music features might be predictive of that kind of commercial success behavior. Okay? And once again, not surprisingly, I don't know how, we find this variable about diminished chords as being one of the important predictors in this paper. And I would argue that that variable is somehow a signal of complexity. So if anything, this is going against the idea that maybe the platforms are just pushing simple music. In fact, this could be a sign of maybe the platforms putting a little bit more emphasis on music that is a little bit more complex. Okay? So with this, let me just summarize. I have 5 minutes left, so I think we're okay. Streaming has changed the way we learn about new music, and it has also changed, in my view, and I think it's not surprising, the demand. So what we as listeners do, the supply side, so what artists and writers, composers, what they do as well, and also the way in which music is promoted. What we're doing in this paper is that we're studying the revealed preferences of streaming platforms, because we view streaming platforms not just as a vehicle for making music available, but also as a vehicle for promoting music, promoting new music, okay? That can sometimes have huge impact on the commercial success of a song. We find that clearly past popularity is obviously one of the strongest predictors of playlist inclusion. But we also find some complexity metrics that seem to be relevant. Also, we find that only very few, like 7.7% of the songs in our sample, are able to achieve a level of success that is sustained over time, as opposed to a quick decay, as what people are used to see in the movies. Okay. So with that, I want to just mention just one more quote from Rick Rubin, which I think is kind of consistent with what we're finding. He says, "Sometimes the point of art is to show imbalance or to create a sense of unease." Okay? In a song, when you hear a dissonant harmony, which is exactly what happens with the diminished chords, these chords that make you feel uncomfortable. When you hear a dissonant harmony that suddenly falls in tune, there's actually a pleasant effect. So when you were uncomfortable and then all of a sudden you start feeling comfortable, that actually releases something and maybe makes you feel better. And that's why the discordant choice may be of interest, because it creates tension, but more importantly, not only tension, but also release. Okay? So I think maybe there is some hope after all. And we were thinking that perhaps we could change the name of the title of the paper, and instead of calling it like this, we could call it just The Mystery of the Diminished Chords. Okay? So that's what I wanted to present. And by the way, I mentioned that my 2 passions are music and marketing. So if you want to learn more about my music, here is a QR code I can share with you later after the presentation. Okay? Okay? Thank you. Yes, Danny?
Very fascinating. So music historically has gone through what I'd call these kinds of shifts.
Yes.
So we get through, very sophisticated rock in the 70s, followed by disco, which is everything that you just described here, minus the fact that it's Spotify. And I could right after grunge and alternative rock, you get Britney Spears. Same kind of lack of sophistication. So that part isn't new. The part that's new is that somehow the platform is reshaping things. And so 3 quick thoughts. Number 1 is we know now how important discovery is outside of the platform as well. Touring and let's say interviews on talk shows or et cetera, podcasts, et cetera. Is there some kind of connection there to explain that bottom right quadrant of the songs that have sustaining power? They are sustained not because of the platform, but because they're going outside of the platform. Or within the platform, Spotify is actually doing something else, which is that they're somehow linking podcasts so that they're able to leverage the entire network.
Yeah, so a quick reaction to that. So actually 2 reactions to that. One is that there is an interesting paper from a PhD student at WashU, and his claim is that if you look at the popular music nowadays, it's pretty much just redoing whatever was successful before. It's kind of like repeating the same old formula. If you look at...
You've just described venture capital, but go ahead.
If you look at Dua Lipa, if you look at many of the songs from Dua Lipa, a lot of them can be seen as being too similar to something that existed 20, 30, or 40 years ago, right? So his claim is that to some extent, the lessons that we got about commercial success from the past are just being repeated nowadays by some of the popular artists. The second point about the touring and all of that. This is not a scientific opinion, it's just my opinion as a consumer of music. It seems to me that the legacy artists, like the artists that have been around for a long time, they get in trouble when they include a lot of new music. There was an interesting case not too far from here in Argentina. So Fito Páez is a very, how many people know Fito Páez? Yeah, quite a few know. Okay, Fito Páez is one of the most famous Argentinian singers from Argentina, and he decided in a particular concert that he would just play his new record. So he gave 1 hour of the new record to the people, and then just people were complaining. I mean, there were actually videos on social media saying, okay, come on, dude. I paid my ticket to listen to the classics, and you're feeding me the new album, right? So I think, particularly for those artists that have been around for a while, I think it's more challenging to change the set list and include a lot of the new songs. But this is, again, my not based on data, but just from my informal reaction to this.
I'll let other people ask more questions, but the one thing I'd say is, but you can check the set list because that is available.
That is setlist.fm, yes. There is a data set for that, yes. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you. First of all, I love this kind of research, but I need to realize this is very difficult to understand data from music. So you are very brave to do that, really. But I work and I have a lot of friends from industry, specifically from the electronic music. And I imagine it to be totally different when you're looking inside this kind of music, because we don't have so much voice. We don't have so much like harmony. It's just BPM. And it's very common right now because they are talking to me like this. They are forced to increase the BPMs in their music right now, because normally it's 100, 120, so it's fine. But now they are trying to create music as with 200, 220. So the music needs to be fast. Right. And why? Why? Because they need to be viral, and the TikTok and the Instagram, they are needing to do this kind of songs about this. So maybe it's a totally new way to look music if you try to try to not understand like the normal music like Dua Lipa or Ariana Grande, but when you try to look these kind of songs,
Yes.
and they are trying to be viral on the Instagram, you be totally different way.
So one thing that I didn't show, but we have done is an analysis by different types of music, and electronic music was particularly different. So indeed, it's a different universe to some extent compared to many of the other genres that we see. Yeah, but thank you for the question.
Folks, I guess we can wrap up here. Thanks for the brilliant presentation. Very curious presentation. Understand.
Thank you.
And now the next presenter is Andrei Hagiu from Boston University.
Okay, thank you for staying so late, and thank you for inviting me. Pleasure to present this work here. So I'll get straight into it. So the main idea of the paper is that personalization, especially for digital products and services and platforms, has become a key source of competitive advantage. So especially products that use AI. So the idea here is the more a company or product sees a customer, the product can get personalized, and in principle, that increases the willingness to pay of the customer for that product. It understands the preferences better, it can be better tailored, and so on. So there's this can take two forms. So the product or the company uses AI to make the product better. So the more the consumer uses the product, the company uses algorithms to improve the product. The other form that this can take is the product is the same, but because you use the same product a lot, you kind of save data in the product, you get more used to it, you just get more out of the product over time because you just have more of your data in it. In both cases, so the key feature, this is what we're interested in, is that the consumer willingness to pay for a particular product increases with usage, right? So like the more you use it, the more willingness to pay, and presumably that gives you a competitive advantage over, say, somebody that just came into the market that has never seen that consumer before, right? So if I've seen the consumer for 10 periods, I have an advantage over somebody that comes in and just sees the consumer for the first time. My product may not be objectively better, it's just that I've seen the consumer more often, I can better personalize. That's the main thing. And again, there's plenty of examples here, I'm sure you can think of your own. The argument is that this is increasingly the key source of competitive advantage for companies that use AI. I mean, it's one of the key features of AI, the ability to personalize. So the research questions we're interested in, so we'll look at it's a relatively simple model to get a core idea, and I think we get something that's somewhat surprising. So we'll look at a model with two firms. The two firms can personalize the product. In the base model that I'm going to show you briefly, they can also personalize prices, so you can just target each consumer, set a different price for each consumer. That's not critical to the results. The firms can be asymmetric. They can start with different amounts of data, and they may have different abilities to improve the product if they see the consumer repeatedly. And we're interested in two questions. The first one is the strategy question relative to data portability, which I guess is the most unusual one. So would firms want, out of the goodness of their own hearts, what I mean by that is out of profit interest, would they want to offer data portability? Not forced by regulators. Would they voluntarily offer data portability? And maybe I'll steal the thunder. I'll anticipate the result. The answer is actually yes, which should sound surprising because I think the usual assumption when you look at other papers and regulators is we actually have to force companies to offer data portability. So we'll talk about like how credible this prediction is. There's lots of interesting implications, but I think the mechanism. My goal here is to convince you that the mechanism is actually quite reasonable under certain circumstances. And of course, there's also the policy question: do consumers benefit if there's also a policy that enforces data portability? I'm less interested in the second one because I think the second one is the one that most people think about. I think the strategy question is a bit more interesting. It's a bit more surprising. So I'll show you the model. You really don't have to focus too much on the details. I'll just focus on the main things. So there's two firms, A and B. It's, again, minimum complexity to just get at the main point. Two firms, A and B, there's 3 periods, 0, 1, and 2, and there's measure 1 of consumers. So there's some very standard assumptions. Marginal cost for each firm is C. There's a discount factor between the periods, and there's an outside option, which is 0. So this is the key. what we're going to assume is that there's a personalized product improvement, meaning the following. If a consumer goes to say, if I'm firm A, I get a consumer in the first period, and in the first period, I offer the consumer willingness to pay VA. That means in the second period, automatically, by virtue of having AI and having seen the consumer for one period, the willingness to pay I can give this consumer in period 2 is going to increase from VA to VA prime, right? So that's going to be higher. Same thing for firm B, right? Except that VA and VB can be different, VA prime and VB prime can be different. So the rates of increase due to personalization for the two firms can be different, but the key is we assume that personalization actually increases willingness to pay. That's the key thing we want to get at. So basically, yeah, data improves the product, and we also assume here in the baseline model to make things easier, personalized pricing, meaning the firm can target a consumer that has been with the firm for one period can see a different price than a consumer that hasn't been with the firm previously. This assumption is not critical to the results. Like, we have an extension which we allow firms to actually, so we force firms to set the same price for everybody, we get pretty much the same thing. So let me just show you, just to be clear, I think this is sort of, it's key to understand what we're getting at here and what data portability actually means. So the idea is the following. If there's no data portability, if you're a firm, in order to go from willingness to pay, say if I'm firm A, in order for me to go from VA in the first period, when I first see the consumer, to VA prime, which is with data, I absolutely need to get the consumer in period 1. So they have to be with me for one period. Now, if, however, let's say firm A adopts data portability, again, out of their own, just at their own discretion. So firm A says, I'm going to make data portable. What that means in our model, so what we assume, is that now, so and firm A wins the consumer in period 1. Then in the second period, both firms are actually going to move from VA to VA prime, and even firm B, even if B has not served the consumer in period 1, they're going to get to VB prime, because if they manage to convince the consumer to come to them, so to switch from firm A to firm B, data portability means the consumer can take their data, firm B sees the data and can use the data to basically personalize the product and pretty much basically get the same benefit as if they had served the consumer in the first period. Hopefully that makes sense, right? Now, of course, you can quibble with this and you can say, well, data portability is not perfect, so there is a difference, of course, in practice between me having served the consumer and the consumer coming with me with the data in a bucket, right, and me using the data. That's fine. We just make it, we're making the easy assumption of saying it's equivalent. Nothing would change if this weren't, if there was some difference between the two. So that's with unilateral data portability. If data portability now is bilateral or it's imposed by policy, then basically, regardless of who wins in period 1, both firms are going to offer the higher willingness to pay in period 2 because basically data is available to both firms and they can both personalize better. So hopefully, I think this is sort of key to understand kind of what we have in mind. So again, the question is, if I'm one of these firms, so in period 0, I have a choice. Do I offer data portability or not? Would you offer data portability? And in fact, usually most people's understanding is like, over my dead body. Like, why would I ever want to offer data portability? Meaning, make it easier for the consumer to switch away from me to the other company. And sort of the key result is actually that intuition is not quite correct. And in fact, in most cases, you do want to offer data portability. And I'm going to show you why. So this is just technical assumptions. I don't think it's particularly interesting here. Basically, the model is one of asymmetric Bertrand-style competition over 2 periods. And without like showing the exact resolution, I'll try to convey the main intuition. Let me make sure. Okay. So I'll try to show you exactly what's going on, and maybe this just to help understand why the results is not what you might have expected. So if there's no data portability, so let's say firm A wins the consumer in period 1, right? Now so with forward look, and this is key, sorry, I should have emphasized this. Assume consumers are forward looking, meaning they understand what's going on. I understand if I'm a consumer, if I come to you and basically I use the product for one period, then my utility from using your product in the second period is going to be higher than the other guy unless the data is portable. So consumers are fully anticipate this. So firm A is going to win in period 1 if the net utility offered in period 1, so which is this, VA plus, VA is, this is net of cost, so I have to add the cost back, so just ignore that. So this is willingness to pay minus price in period 1, plus the utility that the consumer is getting in period 2, conditional on the consumer having been to firm A, right? So there's going to be a difference in utility. If I go to firm A in period 1, my utility, net utility in period 2 is going to be different than if I go to firm B. So I have to basically, obviously we have to calculate that endogenously, but that's the idea. So this has to be greater than the same thing for firm B. So the key thing here is that in this utility, I anticipate the following. Without data portability, well, if I come to firm A, then basically firm A has a massive advantage over firm B in period 2 because they've served the consumer for one period. If I'm the consumer, I kind of understand this. And actually, that's not to my advantage because that means firm B is in an inferior competitive position. And basically, the firm A is going to be able to charge a higher price. I'm going to be left with lower utility. So of course, if the consumer anticipate that because they're forward-looking, then firm A has to kind of compensate for this in order to win. That's a key part of the mechanism. So long story short, if you're a firm B, well, you should be willing to subsidize, right? In principle, you should be willing to subsidize to get the consumer in period 1 because it's essential for me to get the consumer in period 1 in order to be able to offer higher utility in period 2. So the extent of the subsidy is basically the difference in profit that B can have between I win the consumer in period 1, so this is my profit in period 2, versus A wins the consumer in period 1, and this is B's profit in period 2. So there's some subsidy here. And basically, I can run the calculations, but this is the idea. Now, so what changes, without doing the calculations, just to show you what changes if there's data portability. Very similar logic. The key difference is now these profits, so the profits conditional on A or B winning in period 1 are going to be different. And same for the utilities. So what's going on is the following. Let's suppose A commits to data portability. Now, the profit of firm B conditional on firm A wins in period 1 is actually going to be higher, right? If I'm firm B and my competitor has committed to data portability, actually that's actually good news for me because that means, well, actually I'm going to be able to offer higher utility because the data is portable. So that goes up. The utility of the consumer, well, if there's data portability, that can only help the consumer. The consumer is always going to be happy about data portability because now the consumer has a choice between better options. On the flip side, the firm which offers data portability, obviously they're going to be worse off in the second period, right? Because their profit conditional on winning the consumer in period 1 is going to be lower. Why? Because now I'm facing a tougher competitor. They can get pretty much the same benefit as if they had won the consumer. So now we have these, so there's two terms. So these two terms go up and the profit of firm A in the second period goes down. Now the key thing to understand is we're doing it as from the perspective of period 1. So you have to go back to period 1. And if you take these effects into account, it's no longer obvious that this is actually bad for firm A. And in fact, in this model, it turns out that firm A should always unilaterally adopt data portability when it raises total welfare in period 2. And the key thing here is in a Bertrand model like this is always going to be true. So firm A basically just cares about, let me see if I have it here. Yeah, so you're looking at essentially the total, so firm A is going to want to commit to data portability if the sum of firm profits and consumer utility in period 2 is higher under data portability than under no data portability. With Bertrand competition, under Bertrand competition, this is always going to be true. And it's true with the general class of models. So, I mean, in some sense, this makes it sound like A is acts as a social planner. I mean, it's a bit like a social planner that sends you a personalized invoice, right? So it's, yeah. I'll just focus on the most interesting case so you get better intuition for what's going on. So imagine there's something what we call advantage reversal. So what we mean by this is the following. Suppose firm A has the advantage in period 1 without data. So that means VA is greater than VB. So we start in a situation in which firm A is better. But if the two firms have access to data, then firm B is better. So this could be like there's an incumbent, and maybe the incumbent is initially better, like this firm A, but firm B comes in and they have better algorithm, right? So if they get the same data, firm B is all of a sudden better. Well, this is actually the situation in which data portability is unambiguously a dominant strategy for actually both for firm A and firm B. So I'll explain why. So without data portability, basically, for firm A to win, and let's suppose firm A wins without data portability. Well, for firm A to win, it absolutely needs to win in period one. And firm B is doing the same thing. So in some sense, this is like it's a death match, like a competition to the death, meaning we absolutely need to get the consumer in period one, so we throw everything we have at it. So here the total profit is going to be the discounted difference between, is the difference between the present discounted value of willingness to pay across time. So it'll be VA plus delta VA prime minus VB minus this, and B makes 0. If there is data portability, what's really nice is that what's going to happen is firm A is going to win the period in which it has an advantage, which is period 1, then firm B wins period 2 because it has the advantage there. And there's data portability. So now firm A is going to make VA minus VB. So remember, VA minus VB is positive. VA prime minus VB prime is negative. So A goes from this profit to this profit, and this one's higher. And the reason is this, basically. What I'm doing, like I'm firm A, by committing to data portability, it's almost like I'm signaling to my competitor, it's like, relax. You don't have to compete so hard in the first period. You don't have to subsidize so much, because if you're truly better, then you're actually going to serve the consumer in period 2. I just want to serve the consumer in period 1 where I have the advantage. So I'll serve them in period 1, you serve in period 2, we'll both be better off. And interestingly enough, firms are better off, but consumers are worse off. Right? I mean, interesting, the consumer, in this scenario, the consumer always goes to the more efficient firm. Firm A in period 1, firm B in period 2, but they're worse off because in some sense competition is softened. That's kind of the key message. So without going too much into details, this is the main thing. So if you look at, so I've done this with one consumer. If you put a continuum of consumers and the advantage reversal can happen across consumers, you get this result where it is actually a dominant strategy for both firms to commit to data portability. Again, without any regulatory intervention, which I think is quite interesting. Yeah, so I mean, if you're somewhat familiar with switching cost literature and others, you may ask me, okay, well, isn't this like some form of just competition softening? And the answer to that is actually it's a little bit more interesting than that. So there's definitely an element of competition softening, and you might say, okay, maybe it's a little similar to switching cost, but it's not only that, because what's critical here is you need advantage reversal. So the scenario that I showed there, like if there was no advantage reversal, then competition softening would say, well, yeah, you should offer data portability, but actually you'd be indifferent. We absolutely need this advantage reversal for this to happen, which I think is fairly unique. So we call this, just to give a sophisticated name, which hopefully for something that's hopefully intuitive by now. So we call this intertemporal unbundling. We could have just said one firm is better in period 1, the other firm is better in period 2, and we agree to kind of divide, like split the consumer in the periods in which we have an advantage. Okay. So this is fine. Okay, so now you can ask the question. I mean, I'm sure you'll have plenty of questions, especially if you're a regulator, if you think about like what policy implications or real world implications of this. So should firms take this seriously, and should they commit to data portability? And the answer is yes, but we have to be very clear what the assumptions are, right? So the first and the key one is customers have to be forward-looking, and I think that's much more reasonable to assume if, say, we're talking about products for business customers, right? I mean, businesses, when they adopt products, actually tend to be quite sophisticated. They ask themselves, okay, if I buy your product, to what extent am I locked into your product? If I don't like your product, how easy it is for me to switch to another product? Some individual consumers may do that, but it's probably more rare. So, the assumption of forward-looking customers makes more sense for business consumers, business customers. Price personalization is not important. We have an extension that deals with this, so I'll skip that one. The other thing that's interesting here is this works. So just to make it clear, this works because data portability is a commitment vis-a-vis consumers that are going to come in the future, like consumers that I don't have already. If I ask you, well, do you want to offer data portability to customers that you already have? The answer is, of course not, right? Like that's the usual intuition. Like, why would I want to do that? That's silly. So now the interesting question in practice, well, what if I have some consumers, but I'm competing for new consumers? Well, ideally, I want to offer data portability, commit to data portability for new consumers, but not for old consumers, which should obviously raise the question, is not going to piss off the existing consumers like, wait, you're just discriminating against me. So then there might be an issue like, what if you have to pick one policy, either data portability or no data portability for all consumers? In that case, you probably have to look at the various fractions of consumers. So I think that's kind of interesting. And of course, this has to be, for this to work, data portability has to be a credible commitment. I mean, we looked at some examples. I mean, there's some interesting stuff. So there's some companies, this is not empirics, but we looked at it. So there's some companies where I'm fairly confident in saying they do offer proper data portability that goes beyond regulatory mandates like the DMA in Europe and others. They actually do a lot, they offer proper data portability just voluntarily. Now, not all companies do that, right? And the key here is like you have to be able to commit so credibly. It's not just a matter of saying, oh, our product is great, you can move whenever you want. You actually have to commit to, I don't know, certain APIs or ways in which the consumer can say, if I want to move, I'll be able to take my data with me. So yeah, there's some examples here. I'm sure we can debate some of this. By the way, this to me is like, so I don't really do empirical work, but anybody that's interested in doing empirical research on this, I think it's super interesting to look at various companies and I guess come up with some measures of the extent of data portability. Okay, how much time do I have? Ooh, almost done. So I'm just going to skip this. Basically, the story does not quite hold if the consumers are myopic, which I guess is the empirically more relevant case for individual consumers. So of course things break down because now consumers don't anticipate the fact that data portability makes them better off. So now you actually go to the usual intuition, which actually more often than not you don't want to offer data portability. So again, forward looking is a pretty key assumption. Let me just skip this. So yeah, there's an extension in which we show that actually personalization of prices is not important for the key result. So it's actually fairly general. Yeah. So just to conclude, again, the key assumption, one of the key things is whether or not consumers are forward-looking or myopic. So if you're a regulator, you'd probably need to worry about this. Actually, if you're a firm as well, like if you want to figure out whether offering data portability is a good idea. What else? There's one interesting point, an interesting subtlety which I skipped. But for those of you who are very enthusiastic, so people who are very enthusiastic about data portability mandates. So not only are we showing that in some cases data portability is actually kind of superfluous because you should see some of the companies offering it by themselves. I'm not saying this is always true, but in some cases they may want to offer. But so you might say, well, what about in the case with myopic consumers? You would say, well, data portability is not going to rise. Me as the white knight regulator, I should just come in and impose data portability. And it might help, but it might also be very, very bad. And we show this in the paper. One of the issues when consumers are myopic, and let's say both firms actually need data in order to provide positive value, so willingness to pay minus cost to consumers. If you force them to offer data portability, it is possible that the market breaks down. If they have to offer data portability, they're not going to get enough profits to cover their costs, and nobody's going to actually get to the point where they have enough data to offer a positive willingness to pay, which is interesting. So it's cautionary tale if you're a little bit, again, very enthusiastic about data portability mandates. So yeah, let me stop here. Maybe you have questions. Thank you.
Andrei, congratulations for the paper. It's super clear. I was just wondering, you were relating your mechanism to well-known mechanisms, and you mentioned switching costs, right?
Yep.
Something that comes to mind is the Chicago School argument against tying, right? That tying is only optimal when it's welfare increasing, and I have the impression that not having data portability is somewhat similar to tying when you are worse on the second product, the tying product, the tied product.
So I think I think there's a flavor of that. Sorry, can I still, do the slides no longer function? Did they discontinue like automatically when I stop speaking? Wait, it doesn't, oh, there, sorry. Yeah, there we go. So actually I put this as a reserve slides. on switching costs, your question is a bit different, but I mean, we thought about this quite carefully because obviously we thought, well, some people would say, well, this is just switching costs, right? And again, I come back to this idea. I think what's unique here, and it's not true in tying, it's not true in switching costs, that this is particularly valuable when the consumer, I want the consumer to switch. It's particularly valuable when they switch. With switching costs, you don't want the consumer to switch. So like switching cost, sometimes like switching costs softens competition, but if the consumer switches, like there's an inefficiency. In our case, actually, it is if we don't have any exogenous switching costs, and is actually, there's this case in which the advantage reverses. It is efficient for the consumer to switch. That's when data portability is very useful. So that's a little bit, but the idea that, and essentially the idea that you should offer data portability if the total welfare in period 2 is higher, that's reminiscent. It's, yeah, very reminiscent of the Chicago School arguments for tying.
Yeah, because I came to that comparison because precisely the reversal example that you gave, because tying is the most hurtful precisely when the good you are tying to the original good is, your good is worse than the competitors, right? So
tying is
detrimental to profits.
Right, yeah.
When you connect a good that's inferior. But
so, I think there's a nice parallel. I would agree. Yeah, exactly. Yes. I guess the regulators are not here, so they don't have any. Usually, we get these challenges from regulators. Wait, you're saying we shouldn't force data portability? It's like it's a little bit more complicated, but yeah.
So I'm just trying to understand the mechanism behind the result. So is it because when it's easier to switch, it's gonna be more likely that your firm is gonna get with consumers that like you more, and you're gonna extract more willingness to pay from them, or what's the right?
So there's a number of assumptions in there which we've assumed away. So remember, there's no switching cost usual like C or S switching cost. There's none of that.
All right.
The only thing think of it as an opportunity cost, right? In the absence of data portability, so the consumer came to me in the first period. If they were to go to you in the second period, well, it's as if you're seeing them once, right? Versus if they come to me, they get more utility because I've already seen them once and it's more personalized, right?
Okay.
So that's the opportunity cost. And the key is the following. Let's say without any data, I have an advantage, but if both you and I have the data, your product is better, right? Conditional on being able to personalize, your product is better. So now I actually have it's in my best interest to offer data portability, which means I'm going to gift you the consumer in the second period. Because if I don't, you're going to compete like brutally in the first period because you understand you absolutely need to get the consumer in the first period in order to have a chance in the second period. If I give you data portability, say like, listen, let's just calm down. I'll get in the first period, you get your turn in the second period. That's the idea. And the consumer, of course, also anticipates this. So for the consumer, it's a bit like, if they're sophisticated, I think it's not unreasonable. Like companies do think about this. It's like, wait, if I adopt, say, like ChatGPT Enterprise versus Anthropic Enterprise, right? I'm going to put all my data in it. It's going to be extremely difficult to switch, right? So it means maybe the product that I chose, ChatGPT first, maybe is not as good as Anthropic, but I'm stuck because of data portability, because of lack of data portability. But if ChatGPT says, don't worry, I'll give you the data in a format that you can take to Anthropic and you can easily get basically pretty much the same, that's actually nice. But it sucks for the consumer because now we're no longer going to compete as hard in the first period. So we don't have to, we don't have to lower price as much. Okay. Sorry.
Just a very short comment, but in Chile we have, I think, good data sets from the telecommunications agency describing how many people switch every month from one cell phone company to another one, and we have portability. So I don't know if that helps, but
that's
maybe, if you want to try to move this towards something more empirical,
I think there's lots of interesting things. I mean, we have to think about whether that fits the consumers with the phones. But yeah, I mean, I think there's constructing measures of data, and of course, it has to be data portability beyond what regulators ask, which is usually please offer a data dump, which usually is not that useful.
Okay, so thank you very much. Great presentation. Let's congratulate Andrei. And with this presentation, we finish this track of presentation. So now we will have a coffee break, and we will reconvene at 4 p.m. for the final track, okay? So let's have coffee and come back in about 25 minutes. For the final session of the afternoon. For this final session, we will have Eduardo Diniz from FGV, São Paulo, Tai Lam from UCLA, and Daniel Sokol. Who knows Daniel? No one knows Daniel. From USC, we will present for this final session today, okay? So, Eduardo,
E apontar. Aqui, ó. Aqui. Ah, já tá bom. Thank you. Thank you, Flávio, Laila, Delani, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. So I'm going to present to you some of the data of my past research, and then I'm going to explain to you some of things that I'm been doing in the last few years with this name, inclusion exclusion dynamics of digital platforms. Somehow we already know that digital platforms, even when they are designed to include, or you see some sort of inclusion of these platforms, that those platforms also create some sort of exclusion. You know that. So delivery apps, I think, is the most common thing that you see. So you see that, of course, it creates jobs, but at the same time, it creates jobs that without labor rights, so that's somehow it's some sort of exclusion. So eGov, it's a digital platform for the Brazilian government that you can have access to many different types of services from the federal government. And of course, it makes a lot of inclusion in many ways, but it's also creates also some sort of exclusion because some people don't have access to digital instruments to have access to it. So then it reinforces the ideas of exclusion. But I'm not going to talk about those platforms. I'm going to talk about PIX. As you see that Brazilians like to talk about PIX. So then we have lots of research on that. This is a big thing for us now, just for you to know. So in Brazil, the platform with the biggest numbers of users is WhatsApp. The second, it's eGov. Actually, the second is PIX, and the third is eGov. Meaning that, so I don't recall, totally the numbers, but it's something like we have 108 million people using WhatsApp, 170 million using PIX, 165 million using eGov here. So we're talking about platforms that somehow includes a lot. And of course, I'm doing that because I'm studying digital financial inclusion for a very long time. So then my focus is on financial inclusion through digital platforms. And then I'm gonna bring you some evidence of this dynamics of inclusion, exclusion through my studies on digital financial platforms. Cadastro Único is the big database that the Brazilian government has about the poor in Brazil. So you probably have heard of Bolsa Família, which is the largest cash transfer program in the world. So in Brazil, this program includes something like more than 20 million families if you multiply by more or less 3 or 4. So you're gonna have the number of people that it's more than half of the Brazilian population. That's enough to say that has access to this benefit, which called Bolsa Família. Bolsa Família is delivered through this database. So the government created this database, which is called Cadastro Único, which is the database that the government analyzes the social conditions of the families that has the right to receive benefits, okay? So then we started analyzing data from this Cadastro Único data set. So this is part of our research that we've done, funded by Gates Foundation, which called the number of this research program is called the Journey of Financial Inclusion. So the idea is to understand the process of how these recently included families, financially included families, what is their journey. So that's this research. So then we have this data. So 1/3 of the population of the people registered in the Cadastro Único were included in the formal financial system in the last 4 years, 4 years. So meaning at the same time, after the pandemic and after the introduction of PIX. So this is give you an idea that we're talking about. So if we are talking about 21 million families, which is the number of people in the Cadastro Único, so that receive Bolsa Família. So we are talking about 7 million families that had no access to formal bank services before the 2020. So they were included there. So this exactly the type of public that we are looking at to understand their process of being included in the financial system. So that's the number that we had. Another interesting aspect. So the main instrument for those people to use financial services is through digital platforms, the fintechs. So then you see that of course, they receive their benefits through a public bank. So the first access is in the public bank. But as soon as they get the government benefit in the public bank, in the government bank, they transfer this money to a fintech. And they start using this money through, that's the number, they use PIX through using fintechs. So then you can see this from this data. So here you also see an interesting picture of the country. So saying, it's interesting. So just consider that the average, so these numbers are from 2024. So the average transaction of PIX for Brazilians in general are 32 transactions per month, meaning 1 PIX per day, more or less. So this is the average. But if you look to the poorest regions of the country, meaning the North region and the Northeast region, they use more PIX than people from the Southeast, which is where the part of the richer population of the country, and in the South. So this is interesting for us to notice that. So PIX is adopted more by the poor than by the others that are not so poor, meaning that they use PIX because they don't have any other sort of access to digital instrument. It's easy for us to understand our own behavior. So when I go to a store, I can buy with PIX or I can buy with card, credit card or debit card. So those guys, they don't have any other option. They use only PIX. And it's very interesting. We also did in this research some qualitative interviews of many different parts of the country. It's interesting to see. They don't say that they open an account to use PIX. They say that they open a PIX account. They understand that any kind of account is PIX. So then is that their understanding. So for them, PIX is the instrument to be connected to the financial system. But, of course, it's also related to that. So in other presentations that we saw today, this was also noticed that as benefits increase, so the first gray bar is related to during the emergency aid during the pandemic period, and the second gray bar is when Lula government entered, so then they keep the high level of the benefits. Just to give you an idea, so before the pandemic, the average ticket of Bolsa Família was 70 reais. Now, one family can receive up to 600 reais, almost 10 times. It depends on the number of children in the family and so on, but it means that the benefit grew a lot during this period. So, and then, of course, you see by in this chart that the access to credit, this is got this from data from the central bank. So access to credit increased a lot among these beneficiaries. So this is only, we're talking not all the Brazilians, we're talking specifically from the Brazilians that are enrolled in the Cadastro Único, that they are beneficiaries of the Bolsa Família program. So then you see, you can see, for example, the green line, so they grew a lot. So meaning that they had kind of, before 2020, they have a certain level of access to credit, and then after that, they have a lot more access to credit, mostly through credit cards. And then comes the problem. So you saw the presentation this morning of Professor Joia talking about the dark side of PIX. I think this is also related to the dark side. So we see in the Y column, so the compromising of the income. So, of course, this income of those families is an estimate. And but we're talking, and it's more or less the estimate that the banks have from those families, and this is the information that the banks give to the central bank. But most important than the number, if I cannot assure you that, for example, they are compromising 40% of their income, because the numbers are not very precise, but the trend of the curve is very clear. So it means that as they have more access to credit, we say that not the best quality credit, which is the credit card, so they get more in over indebtedness. So this is one picture that is not the best one about picture, and that's why the government is very worried about that. Not only banks, also the over offer of credit that those families are involved too, and then they get a lot of problem with that. So imagine if you have to 40% of your income connected to the debt, so compromised to a debt. This is really a disaster for the family, especially for a poor family. But there are other things. Let's look to other aspects of that. So when you see literature about fintech and inclusion, you're going to see a lot of papers describing how fintechs contribute to financial inclusion. This is somehow true, but there are some limitations on that. We are also interested in looking to the racial discrimination of credit too. So then we see, so those fintechs could solve the problem of racial financial exclusion in the system. So that's the question that we start investigating in another research, meaning that, so do fintechs are able to include financially black people? That's the main question that we are interested in investigation. And then we see that's not. So then you see in the first graph, so before the fintech wave somehow, if here in Brazil we consider that the fintech wave started in 2016, more or less, because of the regulation started in 2013, and then the biggest fintechs entering the market around 2015 and 16. So when you get data from 2017, you see that black people and brown people that are majority. So if you count black and brown population in Brazil, is more than half of the population of the country. This was true in 2017, and is still true in 2024. So meaning that even with those big wave of inclusion, so black people and brown people are still underserved, have less access to credit than white people in general in the financial market. So then we started asking, so why this happen? Two explanations, possible explanations for that. If you go to a fintech, so you're going to see a lot of young people, white male. We don't see that many women. We almost don't see black people in fintechs. Then one thing that happens in those fintechs, so they don't include in their own group of people, so the black. So why could we expect them to include the black? They don't understand the problem that the black have. So, and this is, of course, also related to the reality of the fintech market, because if you go to the financial markets, you see the number of workers, the black workers in the financial market, it's a lot lower than the level of the population. If you go to the technology market, it's the same. So if you consider that fintech, it's composed by people coming from the technology and the financial market, so you couldn't expect anything different from that. So, but it's part of the reality of the exclusion, racial exclusion in the fintechs. But it's not only that. The algorithms also exclude. So the most common way to understand that, it's the zip code. So, by the way, there is no race. But whatever, if you ask for a loan in any kind of company, either a traditional bank or a fintech, no one will ask you about your race, but they will ask you, where do you live? So then, your zip code tell exactly in the region where you live. So, and then where you live. So you live close to other poor people. What's the profile of these poor people that you live close by? Black or brown. So then, you are excluded because you live in a certain way. It doesn't mean if you're a good payer. If you live close to other bad payers, so you're not going to receive a loan, not because of you, but because of the zip code is in the algorithms, in the models that are used to deliver credit. This is only one of the issues, but it's not the only one. And of course, algorithms reproduce implicit biases that we have in the society. So then we create, zip code is one, but we create lots of things that we include then in the algorithms, there's problems. So then the algorithms, even if you are well-intentioned, have well-intentioned in terms of include more people, it depends on the algorithm that you're using, so then you're reproducing those inequalities. Based on that, we went after some fintechs that were created by black people. So we identified 3 cases of fintechs that were founded and managed by black people, trying to understand what they do differently. So why how they are creating some ways to overcome this embedded exclusion of the algorithms. I'm not gonna, this is a paper that we have published. I can let you know later if you are interested. But there's lots of possibilities that we found that mechanisms that they create to overcome that. Some mechanisms related to class recognition, some other mechanisms because they force a black protagonist. They are black, so they understand the black problem. So they want to include, they do that. And also, the way they understand the mistakes of the algorithms. So, for example, if the algorithm says that someone doesn't have to have access to a loan, they don't just accept that. They go there and try to understand why this person was excluded. And then they modify the algorithm. Little by little, they keep modifying the algorithm to make some, promote some inclusion on their own process. Just to wrap up that. First thing, any type of digital platform that intends to do inclusion will also do some type of exclusion. So then you have to be aware of that. So this is part of the process. So any initiative to promote inclusion can also create exclusion. So then you have to understand that. Another thing, we can take from the Black FinTech study that we did. So maybe governance of the platform is more important than technology. So then you have to understand how the process of governance is created to overcome the exclusion embedded in the process of digital platforms that are created to include. And of course, there's a question that we want to say. If you want to create a digital platform, so you have to say for whom you want to create, and then to understand which is the process that is involved in the governance of this platform and how this could really overcome the exclusion process that is embedded in all process of digital platforms, even if they're created to include. Thank you. Very complicated. We usually say when no one had questions, so everybody understood or no one understood anything. Microphone, I think they have people online.
Did you choose to study the black people? Because there's a high correlation in Brazil between black people and income, yeah? The race and income.
Not only in Brazil.
Yeah.
Everywhere. So now, this is also, there's lots of studies on that in US. So US, there's a big movement. It's not, we call here black fintech. In US, they call it black banks. So there's a big movement in US related to that. We are also trying to understand that also in South Africa. We are now developing a partner research with people from South Africa.
Okay.
Any additional question? Yeah. Okay, I think it was very clear presentation then. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Sim, sim. Acho que deve ter uma ali.
Oh no, I can.
Okay. Okay, so the next presenter is Tai Lam from UCLA. So I think we already congratulated him, so take it away.
Thank you. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me. I've learned a lot today, so it's been very interesting. I'm going to bring us back to generative AI for this particular talk. Cool. Yep, it's the right one. All right, cool. I'm going to be talking about generative AI and specifically creative goods and thinking about market expansion, crowd out, and copyright issues, which hopefully ties into some of the legal aspects of this particular conference. This project really started when we were thinking about, how generative AI can impact markets. There's lots of really great research on productivity, and particularly when we started this project, there wasn't much on products. We can obviously use generative AI in our workflows, and that, enhances labor inputs. We're really thinking about situations here, markets where generative AI creates the entire product. And so that's the distinction between just productivity to products. We think creative markets are uniquely in a position to be shocked by this generative AI process, because what makes creative goods unique and so far in the past has been untouched by technology shock as much as traditional products is that they're highly horizontally differentiated. So they're difficult to produce at scale, and because of MASH values being so important, a creative good product that you consume, I might hate entirely. It's important to be able to provide variety. Generative AI changes both of these things. It can provide quality at scale, but it can also provide variety at scale, which is a very unique aspect of this technology shock. And then, of course, if you think creative goods are uniquely human, you might be interested in whether humans still produce creative goods going forward in the future. And then there's all sorts of issues with fair use and copyright because these models are trained on existing creative output. Okay, so broadly construed, we're interested in how generative AI impacts creative good markets. Specifically, the questions are going to kind of break down supply and demand side. We're going to be thinking about how is firm entry and exit and production affected? Is there crowd out when generative AI firms enter? Do they crowd out non-generative AI firms? And then, of course, we know generative AI is able to produce these things, but does anyone actually want to consume these goods? We're going to provide you some evidence in our particular setting of that. And then think about, do people substitute towards generative AI goods, or are they just entirely a separate, different category of goods? Is there market expansion as part of that question? And then, of course, if these new products are arriving into the market, are they novel? Is there variety actually being produced here? And then, what actually happens with demand and supply and equilibrium outcomes is important for answering a whole bunch of fair use and regulation questions. And so this paper, or at least this presentation, I'm going to talk about using a natural experiment where a particular marketplace allowed generative AI to enter a subset of markets, but not all markets. And that's going to give us a really rich environment for some causal estimates using difference in difference. I'm also going to talk very briefly about an equilibrium model. This title says this paper, but it's really for this presentation. Just through the refereeing process, the model has gone into the appendix. But we have lots of great theorists here, so I thought it would be good to surface it. Just to preview the findings, on the empirical results, we are going to find that generative AI firms crowd out non-generative AI firms. People do consume these goods. They are willing to purchase generative AI products. The particular setting we're going to be looking at is stock images platforms, the platform. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that setting in a bit. We find there is market expansion and there is variety, but there's much more concentration in the types of products appearing in the market. For the equilibrium model, the point here is really just to think none of the empirical results were necessarily obvious. We could have ended up in lots of different places. In particular, the equilibrium model was really considering the possibility that congestion and poor quality goods could actually create quite disastrous outcomes. For the interest of time, I'm going to skip the literature, and this has not been updated since, so it's missing lots of things. Let me give you a little bit of background about this particular platform. It's one of the largest stock images marketplace online. It's really a B2B kind of market. So on the buyer side, you might have journalists or people making websites or advertisers, and they need some sort of image to go along with their article that they're writing. Whereas on the supply side, you have artists, and traditionally, this has been photographers. They go out and take pictures of relevant things that might serve well in a particular news article. And then, of course, post-generative AI, it's going to be people who do prompting to create images. The platform here is in the background. What's really important here, a good question is like, why does a stock image marketplace even exist? Don't people just generate their own images and then use it? The platform indemnifies buyers against copyright claims. So the buyer is buying the license from the platform, and so they stand in between any particular legal challenges. And so that's part of why this platform still exists and is, if anything, growing. They're going to set prices. It's going to be a uniform $3 per image. We're not really going to think about price as an outcome in this setting. It's fixed and it doesn't change over this time. That's not really that unusual for creative goods. Movie tickets, for example, are the same price, irrespective of if it's, 100 million budget movie or 1 million budget movie. And of course, they're generating the natural experiment. But we're really focusing on the demand side and supply side outcomes. All up, we're going to have 3 years of data. It's going to be 1,700 markets, 3 million images, and 62,000 or so artists. So it's you should think of artists as small businesses in this case. Okay, so why stock images? Image models have always been at the frontier of this AI kind of development. And so we think this is where the strongest effects will show up. It's also probably a leading indicator for other creative goods markets. No one's watching a fully generated movie just yet, but maybe someday in the future. And I think our results speak to that. Nice thing about stock image markets is the image is the entirety of the product. If you buy yogurt, you have to consume it. We don't see what you feel about the taste of it, but we observe everything about the product characteristic in this case through the images. Somewhat similar to Andreas's paper, where you can observe a lot about the complete product. Also, we have a pretty reliably labeled set of what are generative AI images and not generative AI images on this platform for a few reasons. So the platform plays a repeated game with these artists. The artists derive a lot of income from being on the platform, and the platform requires that the artists themselves declare the generative AI images separately from the non-generative AI images. We do see lots of account banning for not adhering to this particular rule. There's very strong image moderation even before generative AI. Human reviewers actually review the images and algorithms as well, and that did not change once they included generative AI. And also, the platform itself is actually one of the builders of these image generation models, so they have a pretty reliable way of detecting these images. And being able to observe this generative AI label is important because we're not just interested in what happened to the market after generative AI occurs. We want to know specifically for the non-generative AI firms versus the generative AI firms, how are their outcomes changing or differing from one another? Okay, so let me tell you about the setting a little bit more. Here are two examples of markets. So say I want to write an article about Tesla. I might be in the market for images that contain Tesla. Or I'm from LA, and so both of these are kind of relevant. I want to write an article about road rage in LA. I want to attach a relevant image here. I've only in Brazil right now, I've only got a sample size of 2 Uber rides. I've experienced quite hectic driving in Sao Paulo, but not much honking. So I don't know if there's much of a market. It seems like it's just pretty okay. People are pretty chill, no road rage, but in LA, this is relevant. This is what it might look like before generative AI was allowed to be on the market. They're all real images. Photographers go out and take these images. Post-generative AI policy change, what you will see is in markets like road rage, you have generative AI images. So a few things, you might look at these images and be able to spot it's generative AI or not. That doesn't matter. The label is very, very prominent to all buyers. And then you should also think for yourself, would you buy these generative AI images over the non-generative AI ones? That's kind of the reason why we're collecting this data and doing this exercise. We're interested in what people actually think about whether these generative AI images are substitutes. Okay, so generative AI is actually only allowed to enter in non-branded markets. So because the platform is afraid that someone will generate an image of a wonky-looking Tesla that would be misrepresenting Tesla's brand, they don't allow generative AI images in these branded markets. Everything else is fair game. And so what we end up with is a whole bunch of markets like Tesla, Gucci, other brands that are controls, and a whole bunch of markets that are going to be treated. Okay, market definition is very important here. We're going to pretend to be a consumer of images and undertake a search on the platform in order to build our market of images. So we do this in a very hands-off way. We start out with the hierarchy of the platform's own kind of categorization, and then search through it and build up the images that consist of that market. That's going to lead to the 1,700 markets we've got here. Around 300 of these are going to be branded markets. And then so, of course, we've got a diff and diff type style set up here. Let me just give you a taste of some of the raw data. On the left here in blue are the treated markets, and that's the number of images that are being uploaded to the platform each month. We're going to be looking at everything at the market month level. Two things, the solid vertical line is when the policy was announced that they would allow generative AI. The dotted line is when it actually kicked in. And so we're going to be mostly focusing on what's happening when the blue line ticks up. And then I'll also show you the standard event study equivalents on the right here. So what you see here is like there's an explosion of images being uploaded onto the platform. But obviously the question is like whether anyone wants any of these images to begin with, right? And then we'll get to those results in a little bit. Before we get there, I want to also give you a taste of the embeddings data that we have. So we're going to download all of these images and we're going to run it through some off-the-shelf embedding models. The idea behind embeddings is really just to convert images into something quantifiable. So we're going to take images, we're going to convert them into high-dimensional embeddings, 1,000 or so columns. They contain some information. It might be how bright the picture is, how many people there is in the picture, how angry that face on the road rage is. If I project that into something 2D and visual, here I'm showing you 8 markets. The top 4 are control markets, the branded markets. The bottom 4 are the treated markets. And this is all pre-policy change. You'll see here that there's clusters of images. You can think of them as, for the branded markets, that might be pictures of Tesla's factory is in one cluster. Picture of a Tesla car is another cluster. Picture of just the Tesla logo is in another cluster, right? And so this gives us a sense of how similar or how different images are. And this is the pre-period. If we go to the post-period, we're going to add these black dots. I'm showing you just the non-generative AI post-period images. But the predominant story here is they locate near where existing images are. That's going to be because it's the same roughly producers of non-generative AI taking additional images that locate pretty similarly around pre-period images. I'm going to show you now the addition of the post-period generative AI images. And so the things you should notice here, they don't enter in the control, obviously. They only enter in the treated markets. It's going to fill out the space. The generative AI images are filling out the space in between the existing images. They do sometimes locate directly on top of those images. And then sometimes they also locate outside of where existing images located. And so this is all going to give us a way to quantify things like novelty and variety and things like that, which we will get to. Thanks. Okay, so just to be clear, some of the outcome variables we're focusing on: number of images uploaded to a particular market per month, number of active artists per month, the quality of those images, and if I get a chance, I'll touch on what that means. We do actually observe the sales of these new images per month, so that's crucial. The sales rate, which is just a transformation of existing variables, and then for the images that are sold, what our model of quality actually says about them. And then we have a whole bunch of product characteristics embedding-based measures to kind of think about volume of the market, the variety, the novelty. Okay, I'm going to skip this defining quality. I'll get to it if I come back to the quality measures. Before we get to the different results, I actually want to speed through a model to kind of help us think about what could potentially go wrong if a platform allows generative AI to enter its marketplace. We're going to focus on 2 dimensions: the differential cost between generative AI and non-generative AI production, that's the gamma, and the differential quality between generative AI and non-generative AI. That's the nu you see up there. So it's a very simple, kind of parsimonious model, but it captures some of the things we're interested in. In particular, congestion is a key feature of this model. So people are going to be searching on the platform for a good match for when they're consuming an image. Some of the highlights of the key things that we're going to do on the supply side: unit production firms. They're going to have a type, and that type is going to give them whether they're better at doing Gen AI or better at doing non-generative AI. That's going to model something we see in the data, which is when generative AI firms enter, they're completely new firms. They're different firms. There's not much switching going on. We have gamma, which shifts the cost of generative AI. So if the cost comes down, we have more entry by generative AI, but they enter based on expected profits. So they need an object to understand, if I enter, what's the probability I'm going to be sold? That object is going to come in the demand side completely. But so because they're unit production firms, they just make the entry decision. That's also the production decision. So the demand side is where all of the meat comes in. We're going to have consumers are going to consume, just have unit consumption, but they're going to search for a good match. Importantly, the match value is a very key part of this model because it's a creative goods market. They're going to draw from a mixture of a distribution of generative AI and non-generative AI images. So the idea being they can't filter in this particular. In practice, they can, but we know from a lot of research, people don't use filters much. The idea here is the gap between the new gap, which is the quality differential, average quality differential between generative AI and non-generative AI goods. The further apart they are, the more congestion that creates. The idea being, if I draw a random image from the market and it's a very bad generative AI image, I know that I will get a much better draw on average if I redraw, so I'm going to redraw until I get a good non-generative AI image. But there is still a possibility that because of the taste shock, that I draw generative AI images that happens to beat the average or beat the reservation value in the Weitzman model we're going to apply. And so this is allowing for the possibility of congestion. I'm not going to give the notation for the equilibrium. I'm just going to highlight it in a pretty simple graph here. So horizontal axis is going left to right as Gen AI becomes less costly. Going from bottom to top is generative AI becoming a better quality. What's important here is if the cost of generative AI is not that much cheaper than non-generative AI, and the quality is really bad, you can get a market for lemons type effect. It's not coming from information asymmetry, it's coming from the uncertainty from each draw from the platform. There's a region where generative AI quality is less than non-generative AI, but you can still get gains and market expansion for the platform because there's a chance that you get a very high draw. That creative goods kind of market intuition bites here. There's a region where generative AI might actually be better on average than non-generative AI in terms of quality. And in this region, we get trivially market expansion. And provided that the costs are low, we get lots of entry and actually lots of competition occurring here. And then it is also absolutely possible that the costs aren't that different, but quality is very high. And you get less competition. Consumers in this green region are generally worse off. The consumers in the blue region are generally better off. Okay, let's get back to the empirical results. We're doing diff and diff. We're comparing markets like road rage against markets like Tesla and seeing what's happening to a whole bunch of outcome variables. This is just event study plots, but again, I'm going to focus on the post 7-month result. So what happens when the platform allows generative AI? 7 months in, what's going to happen is production is going to massively increase. You saw the raw stats for that graph. Here, I'm going to show you all of the results in pairs. The odd column is going to be for all images. The even column is going to be for just non-generative AI images. And so the combination of the two gives you what's happening with generative AI. We see total production increases, but that's actually masking a fall in non-generative AI production. So it's generative AI coming in and crowding out existing production. The same story happens with the number of artists. So we are actually seeing that non-generative AI artists actually exit entirely. And then we have a measure of embedding of quality, which we do based on embedding. So we use very, very pre-period data to just create a quasi, we have probability of, we know where the images were sold. We can create a model predicting whether embedding characteristics lead to image being sold, and that's our measure of quality. So according to the model, the images that are being produced look like images that would in fact sell. That's true for both all images and the images that remain for non-generative AI. And this is actually consistent with just the low quality non-generative AI firms exiting the market. So we have a measure that says these images on your data look like they are better images or images that would be more likely to be sold. But of course, what's important is whether people actually buy them. So the supply side results here, we see overall sales increase. That's great for the platform. Lots of market expansion. But for non-generative AI firms, they're losing sales. That's consistent with them reducing production, exiting the market. Sales rate overall falls, and this is kind of what we would expect with some level of congestion kind of going on potentially. Although that's not the full story, because if we look at the quality of the images that are actually sold during this period, that actually goes up. And so even though there's obviously a massive explosion in production that outpaces sales, but sold quality hasn't fallen as we might expect if it was due to severe congestion. Okay, so the combination of the results kind of put us somewhere in the blue region. At least our model says quality, the average quality of generative AI images is actually higher. And I want to come back to the embedding measures. So we're going to take our embedding measures and treat them a little bit more quantitatively. We're going to create 3 measures. Let me try to speed through these. We're going to do a measure that is market volume, the convex hull of all the images. The way you can think about this is the frontier. Are new images being located outside the convex hull of existing images, in which case it would expand market volume. We have a measure kind of variety, although this can be a little bit loose. We measure the trace of the eigenvalue, so the variance in the main principal components from our embedding measure. What this can help us pick up is if the expansion is just coming from clusters that are outside the convex hull. Our convex hull measure would say this increases market volume, but the trace measure might actually say we're technically not getting as much variety as we were before. And then we have a measure of concentration amongst those embedding measures. What this really measures is, are generative AI producing a lot of a particular type of images? Is it in a particular direction within the embedding space? Okay, so let's speed through these particular results. We're going to see market volume does increase for all images. This is entirely coming from generative AI. the non-generative AI firms don't change where they're locating. They're still within their existing convex hull. Overall variety comes down, or rather the dispersion of images falls, so there is clustering going on. For non-generative AI, due to the exiting mechanics, their dispersion is actually becoming more widespread. And then in terms of, are these images more concentrated along one particular dimension? So like how bright they are, how many people there are, or whether the expression is angry versus sad. We're finding there is overall more concentration along particular dimensions of the embedding for all the images, whereas the reverse is happening for non-generative AI images. We interpret this as non-generative AI firms, the ones that remain, end up in niches that are good for them to survive in. Okay, I'm going to skip that. How much time do I have? Like five? Was that 5? No. Oh, no. I missed something. Oh, 3 minutes. Okay. This is different data than I'm showing you, but a lot of people ask us about artists. This is slightly different data that we've collected for a future paper, but I will just preview some of it here. We want to know for the artists that have to switch. There's a small number of artists that actually switch from non-generative AI to generative AI. We want to know what that switch does to their production and things like that. And so for this particular data set, we use a different strategy. We use an IV that's like a Bartik instrument. But the idea here is really just to capture for the people who have to switch technologies, are they doing better? Are they doing worse? Production increases around 13%, but their sales overall fall. And actually a lot of them actually still lose relative to how they were doing before. But that's sensible. These are going to be the artists that are facing a lot of competition from generative AI. They do enter in more new markets. So for people who switch from non-generative AI to generative AI, they end up expanding to markets they previously weren't in, around 20% more markets. Their quality happens to be lower relative to their previous quality images, which kind of makes sense if they're halfway in to generative AI instead of being dedicated to understanding that technology. Okay, so bringing it back to some of the legal questions here, obviously lots of these models use copyright protected data. Our platform doesn't, to be clear. This isn't about our platform, but in the US, and I'm not a lawyer, but I'll try my best, 2 of the 4 important determinants of whether your fair use is actually fair use is the amount of substantiality of the portion used and the effect of use upon the potential market. And we think our measures of embeddings allow us to calculate that substantiality. Obviously, it's still up for court to actually decide on whether something looks similar enough, but it's actually possible to measure, and we do find, yes, there is going to be generative AI goods that are locating on top of existing goods, but there's also lots of convex hull expansion going on. And then, yes, we also show that consumers are substituting from non-generative AI to generative AI goods, so there is some effect of the use upon the potential market. We also do some heterogeneity by human images containing humans versus not, and also heterogeneity between niche markets and large markets. Some of the highlights here really are the niche markets face a much higher, all the directions are the same, but niche markets get a larger effect of generative AI, so more entry from non-generative AI, more crowd out, and more substitution. Okay. Concluding, we studied the impact of generative AI on a creative goods marketplace, specifically stock images. We see an explosion of production that's crowding out non-generative AI firms. Non-generative AI firms are exiting. The ones that stay, however, have higher quality products according to our quality model. People do, in fact, buy generative AI goods and substitute away from non-generative AI goods. Sales rate definitely goes down, but our quality measures would indicate that there isn't significant congestion going on. that would lead to actually worse quality products being purchased on this platform. And then we have market volume expansion, but there is some concentration and reduction in novelty. And we see evidence of market depletion, which is relevant for fair use. And we hope policymakers find this useful. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Ty. That's a very clever application to look at, I think. And I just have one quick clarifying question on the second data set you have with the switching technology. Did I understand the mechanism right, or are you able to say either way that when a non-AI, non-generative AI user switches to AI, their sales go down, and that's suggestive that they were probably not good quality, and they would probably be doing even worse had they stuck with that technology? Is that the mechanism you're pushing, or?
No. So the only thing our IV kind of passes out is if you would have switched to generative AI kind of just based on unobservables about the artists. So this reduction in sales that we see includes the effect of competition.
Yeah.
So yeah, for artists that switch to generative AI as a result of competition, their sales still fall overall.
Right. I'm asking about the mechanism by which they switch. So they're switching because they would switch because
of competitive pressure.
Because of competitive pressure. Exactly. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so one question. How much of the effect would you attribute to the fact that Gen AI will create different products, right? And in your market, people have different preferences. So in a sense, you're bringing more differentiated products in the market, right? So do you think how much do you think this accounts for the effect that you find?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It's a tricky one to really pin down, like whether it's just targeting new, like I guess we can't know. Like these results could be consistent with a whole bunch of existing buyers leaving the market and new buyers coming in that like generative AI products, right? And this would be the story of the generative AI products aren't necessarily substitutions. It's just with switching out the consumers on this market. We can't tell that, unfortunately, from the data that we're looking at.
I was more thinking about from the model perspective. I know you cannot tell from the data, but what will the model tell you about this? Meaning, you are introducing you have a market, right? And served by some type of products, and now you're bringing a different type of product. And of course, there is some overlap, but also some new attributes in a sense. So a better match consumer preferences with the new products. So you have spending more, the opportunity for matching increases, right?
Yeah.
So so that's what I'm saying. So theoretically, how much of the effect is of this better, supply or matching of preferences by bringing these new products to the market?
Yeah, in this model as written, we force the variance of the draws to be the same between generative AI and non-generative AI. So in some sense, we shut that down, and we also, only really have one dimension of quality or match going on. I think what you're saying is potentially the generative AI could be drawing from a different distribution variance-wise as well. And I think that's kind of an extension we could go in some direction. But this is the simplest version for sure.
And on the realm of extension, sorry, I don't want to monopolize, but perhaps one extension you might consider is if there is a platform competition with other platforms, and one relies on the older technology and one platform advances and adopts the new technology. And so what happened with the competition? And given that you have data, I don't know if you can get data from a competitor and see what happened with their sales compared relatively to the legacy or traditional platforms? That could be also possible extensions, just suggestions here, not a question. Yeah,
I think that's a great idea. And there was variation in the timing of how platforms adopted AI. So I think that's possible. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. And finally, Daniel, welcome. Thank you. Yeah, you are strange to this podium, so take it away. Yeah.
Now with a microphone. So we heard quite a bit yesterday about platform mergers, and I am going to bring something new to bear, which is some empirics on it. We've seen some amount of empirics in working papers, but really nothing beyond working papers. I do something a little bit different. Oh, I already moved ahead. Sorry. So this is joint work with Yang Chang and Carmelo Chanamo. And what I'm going to do first is motivate the paper. Then I'm going to tell you what our contribution is, and ultimately tell you that we think there's something interesting here, and I'll also preview where I think we have some problems. And that's, I think we need some cleaner identification, and I'll try to give you a sense of what we're doing to fix that. So you heard yesterday, we have enforcers who are suspicious of platform mergers and acquisitions. We're focusing just for these purposes on the US because our data is US data. So the FTC, as you know, sued Meta rather than Facebook with regard to the acquisition of Instagram and WhatsApp. They, by the way, lost that in court. Adobe and Figma ultimately had to abandon their deal, just so that you understand. Figma then is trading at a fraction of what the purchase price would have been, which suggests, wow, complementary assets might make sense. We know from a paper in Management Science in 2017 by Agarwal and Lee that at least when they initially looked at the the Instagram deal, that it actually helped consumers. Visa and Plaid totally abandoned, and iRobot ultimately got abandoned as well and went out of business. And if you like, but the concern was somehow, they never quite articulated the concern, some kind of ecosystem theory of like, oh my God, Amazon's going to find out information about your house, which I always thought was bizarre because in fact, the square foot, or the layout of your house is public information, so it's just where the dust balls are. So it turns out we've known for a long time that the game plan for platforms has been you grow by acquisition. Digital platforms are not the first to do this. If we look across prior generations, like pharma did this all the time. There is a paper there. Devices, hardware as well. And we've seen this time and time again, and there are reasons why you buy, and it's largely complementary assets. We've also seen fundamental changes in the U.S. stock market. You need much more in terms of revenues to go public, and just it's costly to be a public firm, so we don't have as many. So that's down massively. So for exits for most companies, successful exits are via acquisition. And the big question we have is essentially a regulatory one. So we had earlier the discussion of, does regulation lead to uncertainty? This is all about uncertainty. And the question is, when we have tougher enforcement, does this actually mean we have, I promise you, I'm not the one doing it. When we have tougher enforcement, does it mean less M&A? So basically, if a cop is on the beat, Do we see less crime, kind of thing? Though this is not criminal by any but or potentially, does it just change what we do? The answer, by the way, since we'll just get to the punchline, M&A doesn't go down, just the nature of the M&A changes. So if we are suspicious, what we can say is, when we know that there's going to be a police officer with a radar gun, we tend to go slowly in front of the police officer. That's what changes. So I'll explain to you why. So there are different kinds of deals. So deals essentially that are more substitutive fall 11.2%. We see an enforcement inflection and particularly it's targeted at younger firms. So these would be the nascent competitors potentially. And then what we see is they're no longer complementary in quite the same way. They move more towards horizontal deals, and it seems not to impact vertical deals at all. And it turns out vertical deals tend to have lower risk overall. So essentially what's happening is we're getting to similar type targets, but less scrutinized ones because they don't seem to be nearly as ecosystem specific. They tend to be more horizontal. And by this time, we have, during this time, case law that was from the early 1970s, and now we have a better sense, which basically suggests, yeah, with a nascent deal, it still can't be so super speculative, but I'll get there. So it turns out when you have enforcement, and this is across all areas of regulation, it's going to change the dynamics. That shouldn't be. I'm really not touching it. Here's my proof. I'm just going to keep on holding it like this. Substantive versus complementary. We know what that is. So a substantive deal, that's Coca-Cola buys something just like Coca-Cola. See? It wasn't me. Complementary would be like the Brazilian cheese that you put on top of the pizza, right? It tastes good together, right? Better than just, it's caipirinha cheese? Yes. Catupirin cheese. Right? Complementary assets. When we say substitutive, it's broader than just horizontal because it's basically about capabilities. So this is why and how do we figure this out? Because we look at the textual analysis when we're looking at pitch book data where companies describe themselves. So how do we believe it? Because that's what companies are saying about themselves. It's not, do I think that they're beautiful? It's that they're telling me that they're beautiful and exactly how they're beautiful. So we could think about something that's substitutive, looks like killer acquisitions. So there's a famous JPE paper by Cunningham, Ederer, and Song, and it gets to a theory that we saw earlier on about platform envelopment from Andrei's colleague, Marshall Van Alstyne, plus Jeff Parker. Actually, Tom Eisenman's at a different institution. We don't care about him either. But it turns out that the complementary stories are the ones where we're more likely to see efficiencies, right? The dynamic capabilities type story. And so the premium tends to be. You know, I might as well do a little bit of dance and, you know. So we understand how enforcement can raise the costs of a deal. I just want to put in the merger context, 98% of all deals get cleared no matter what. So it's a very small percentage of deals for which we have significant scrutiny, and even smaller percentage that somehow get blocked in any kind of meaningful way. But when you have more enforcement intensity, that's going to have effects, and we're going to look at those effects. So the first is, right, we would think that it would just reduce, right? You have more enforcers, more scrutiny, people are less likely to do things, right? So presumably, if there are a bunch of muggings in front of the school, and all of a sudden there's a lot more security, there would be fewer people. Then The second hypothesis would actually be this is going to impact smaller firms more than larger firms, where the uncertainty is larger. Why do we worry about the younger firms? Number one, unclear what the counterfactual would be. Number two, they're so small, it's not like you can say that, oh, there's efficiencies in the deal because we can immediately see, because these are very young firms. I'll put in perspective. When WhatsApp was acquired, I think they had 100 employees, right? But Meta, then Facebook, saw that there was lots of potential in the deal. But it also could be on the supply side. When you have less acquisition risk, it means lower VC valuations, and it could be that there aren't going to be substitutable targets. So we see some of this. Co-authors for which I was not invited on the paper, I don't take it personally. Ginger Jin, Mario Lechese, and Liad Wagman, they look at US data in separate work, looking at what the impact of the equivalent of this a Brazilian digital bill, that what they said, the DMA-like thing. They actually did something like this in China. By the way, the results in China are not good. So for those of you who are Brazilian, I'm so sorry for you. Because what did we find? Number one, venture capital money went down. And number two, entry of new firms also went down. I guess you could mention that to Kajay. I did. Here's what we look at. We specifically focus on software because that's where this kind of situation first it arises, where we've been the most concerned with regard to platform power. We are looking over a very long period of time since basically the dot-com bust all the way to 2022, which is when we have good data and where other things are not changing for various reasons that I can get into. And it gives us a large number of deals. And how do we figure out the matching of who's in what kind of category? It turns out I have a different colleague, Jerry Hoberg, and someone who was at USC for a while but is now elsewhere, Gordon Phillips. They've basically revolutionized the fields of accounting, finance, information systems, and strategy by coming up with a textual analysis of what businesses actually do as opposed to what they say they do in their securities filings. And so we're able to match who's in what business. So we basically go through to figure out which kind of deal types we have. We do the tech similarity, and we're able to figure out which deals are substitutive versus which are complementary. And we find an inflection point. So what has changed? So number one, by 2017, the OECD first identifies that these kinds of acquisitions may be problematic, which means there's at least a growing global consensus. There's a growing global consensus that this is an issue. So that is probably the latest amount of time, at which point everyone, including, by the way, the US has made a submission to the OECD on this matter. But before that time, by 2016, all of a sudden, you have enforcers saying, you know, we gave these deals a pass thinking, well, they're not, you know, head-to-head type deals. We shouldn't worry about them. We're rethinking some of those. And that tells us about when we hear leadership say that means that agency practices is already changing. Do we have something that's clearer than just that? Unfortunately, no. What Agarwal and Lee said to me, because I presented this 2 weeks ago at BU, they're like, that's because 2017 is when our paper came out. Inflection point is our paper. No, really, they did. But let's imagine that it's true. But again, we're worried about it. Here's why it looks so clean. By the way, I will note, this is long before Lena Khan actually graduated from law school. So it's not her. It's not a change in the Trump administration. So it turns out our main hypothesis is supported. We're seeing an 11% decline after 2017. As I mentioned, it's concentrated among younger targets. So you see we have very strong results, both young targets and post-2017. And here I think you can see visually the difference between the older targets and the younger targets. And it should not surprise you that more mature firms are going to be less concerned, also because they're probably going to be less. You tend to have fewer of them getting acquired by that size. There's just less uncertainty. We know what the risks are. By the time you're a larger firm that is venture capital backed, you already know what the trajectory is. And so if you've been shopped around, everyone has basically already taken a look at you and figured out, is there antitrust risk? If there is high antitrust risk, they're just not doing the deal with you. So younger firms, it's not clear to figure out how risky you are. So that's why we're more likely to see it. So here's what we see in terms of the reallocation. We're not actually seeing a real change. We are seeing a tiny, tiny change. And if the deal volume is the same, the interesting thing here is the composition of the deals, as I said before, is what changes. Okay, so let's look at what that means. The large tech platforms are more cautious because they know that there might be significant investigation. They don't want to have deals blocked. We're able to look at GAFAM versus non-GAFAM firms. So what are non-GAFAM firms? They're big, they're tech, they're just technically not big tech. Maybe if we put on the music again that you have. No, it's okay. Okay. Okay, no, it's okay. So here's what we see that consistent with enforcement, looking at the potential competitive harms, where you have the strongest regulatory tension. What a surprise. Firms pay attention to these incentives and they change their behavior as a result. And what's interesting is we see this shift not just in the United States, but across other jurisdictions as well. By the way, other major markets does constitute Brazil because this is an important market for antitrust to get approval. And so we're seeing this shift overall. We also look at patents. There are some other working papers that look at acquisitions and patents. And it suggests also that it corroborates our findings. So here's some interesting things in terms of how the substitution works. We could look at alliances. We could look at corporate venture capital minority stakes. We don't do that yet. And then we might look at some other things. So acqui-hires, which you also heard about yesterday, also fall below the thresholds. We don't look at acqui-hires. And the question is, do these modes also absorb deals that has been shifting enforcement? Open questions. We're looking at that right now. So here's what the implications are. If we're enforcers, this is what I was told to people yesterday, it means maybe you should be thinking about unintended consequences. We heard about that earlier. Number two, it is at that early stage, the most speculative stage, that it's having the biggest impact. Frankly, that's also where the biggest finance risk is. And the net welfare effects, still an open question. So what are the limits? We know that we're looking at software. Maybe other industries are different. It could be that maybe we need to be looking beyond substitutive versus complementary. Maybe we should actually look at the 3 different categories: ecosystem versus horizontal versus vertical. We're working on that now. And there may be some technological shifts that may have nothing to do with enforcement, and would love some ideas on that. One thing that we're looking at for this period, particularly pre-shift, the government actually lists what are called early terminations, which is that these deals are so not problematic that they actually say we don't need to go through the entire 30 days. You can terminate the deal after only 15 days. So that tells us about the deals that they look at, that they just basically say don't matter. So these are the deals that are actually reported, that are not under the reporting thresholds. Then we're also taking a look at the deals that are the most problematic ones, because those are the ones that our antitrust agencies explain, go to Congress, and talk about the complexities of those deals, which leaves us with everything else. Because many deals have both pro and anti-competitive elements, but you do some kind of analysis to figure out, does the pro outweigh the con? And that's where we are at the moment. So again, the big takeaway is that enforcement is not actually stopping M&A, it's just shifting the boundaries of where M&A is happening. And with that, I'm going to stop, and I'm not going to go back to prior slides. Thank you. Andres, then Anthony.
This is only a clarification question. Probably you explained this and I didn't get it, but so when you say greater enforcement, exactly what do we mean? Do we mean that
greater scrutiny on deals? So if before it's like, here we have it. So I'll give you a non-tech version. Coca-Cola wants to buy a company that makes forks and knives. Go ahead, no problem.
Right.
So it would be the Google acquisition equivalent of that. All of a sudden they're like, whoa, just because you're Google, we're looking at all of your deals more carefully.
Okay, and that came as an announcement.
So it doesn't come as a formal announcement. So this is really why I was having trouble with the identification. I'm always looking for more help. They don't expressly say, you're Google, we're going to look at all of your deals, but that's precisely what they're doing. And so when they signal, well, we might think differently today about some of the deals we approved in the past, the inference is because you are Meta, Google, Microsoft, etc., we're looking at you. But it's never that obvious, unfortunately.
So that non-explicit signal was enough for them to change the behavior.
Yes.
Okay.
So before you were married, do you remember going to a dance club where there's a guy who's standing next to a woman that you might want to ask to dance, and all of a sudden he flexes? He's not actually saying to you, stay away, but that's exactly what he's saying. By the way, that was like the first 25 years of my life. Anthony.
Yeah, I'm really curious. I don't know if this speaks exactly to your contribution, but these early termination notifications you talked about, do we know informally or even formally that these firms test out the scrutiny by doing some, maybe let's just try it and see what they say and see where they look, to suggest that maybe these early termination notifications are not just random and don't have any subsequent effect on the next try? Is there any evidence of that?
So I like where you're going with this. No, typically it's just sort of pro forma of like, this shouldn't have really concerned. What they're trying to do, if they're trying to get around it, they don't want risk because it's sort of the nature of the agreement. So there are the financial terms and then there are the non-financial terms. They don't want to have additional risk to the deal. But what you're saying is actually relevant in a somewhat different way. They say, why even bother to have them look at it? Maybe we should do deals that the government doesn't even look at because it's below the reporting requirement. So, but I don't think anyone's trying to tempt fate. This is like going in front of a police officer and giving them some kind of hand gesture that just to see if they're paying attention. You don't tempt fate that way. Or I was going to say, the 18-year-olds maybe in this building tempt fate that way, but only after 3 beers. But everybody else, not so much. Somi.
Hi, Professor. Thank you, and it was a very interesting topic. I want to know our classic question from class, which is what brought about the idea for the paper? What was your motivation for the paper?
Right.
And secondly, as someone going into private equity M&A on the legal side for transactions, I want to know, how do you think this impacts the greater private equity environment?
Yeah. So sort of what motivates it is there are a bunch of people making these broad claims, and the thing is testing it out. Are these actually true? And it seems not so much. And then there were some existing papers looking at the so-called killer acquisition in the tech context, but they were looking at different things. So there is patent work, in fact, by the people who wrote the killer acquisition in pharma paper, saying we don't see it in tech, but they're looking at patenting. And I think that's important because everyone said, aha, you see, they're killer acquisitions. I'm like, it's pharma. Pharma is fundamentally different than tech platforms. But so that's what motivates it. The second question is private equity. So private equity is interesting. It's related because you'd say, well, what's the difference between venture capital and private equity? Just a few extra zeros. But in fact, it's also different. So there's also a lot of scrutiny of private equity deals because that they might be raising costs to consumers. Particularly, we've seen this in the United States in the hospital setting, where it turns out if it's a physician group that's acquired by private equity, prices go up. If there is a mechanism here of we say we're concerned about private equity, is this changing the nature of private equity investments? I think that's exactly a great question that I don't think, to my knowledge, I've yet to see a working paper that goes exactly to that, but I think that also is a fundamental question that deserves research attention.
Any additional question for Daniel? He doesn't bite.
It's okay.
So that's okay. Okay, so then thank you very much. Let's applaud. Stay there, stay there, stay there. And now, with this, we conclude our final research presentation. What we need to do, Daniel, is to say thanks to everyone. But let's invite all the organizers to come here. Anthony, you too. Maybe we'll start from the very right. Do you want to say anything, Anthony?
Just that what I like about this and these other events that we've done in Latin America and other countries is just to have the mix of strategy scholars, marketing scholars, finance people, people in operations, people in IS. It's just a nice reminder that we're all looking at very similar problems. We just approach it differently, and that's very eye-opening. And I want to credit Danny for opening my eyes to having these sorts of interactions, because I think it's only healthy for all of us to get out of our silos. And I think today was a great example of that, seeing the variety of disciplines and approaches to these common issues of platforms.
I'll just very quickly say thank you all, particularly those of you who stayed the entire time. But the other thing that I will just add to, in a complementary way to what Anthony is saying, part of the value is also seeing the people in practice, whether managers or government officials or other practitioners, also give insights, because it sharpens the way we think about issues. It gives us things to think about also in terms of further research. And then finally, having something global gives us the kind of cross-country, cross-industry kind of richness that we don't always think about and we don't have the opportunity to do. So I thank all of you for that too.
And on this token, also would like to thank everybody who stay late and people who travel from far places to come here and be here, sharing their knowledge, even if you don't present it. But I know you asked questions, you talk to us over coffee, share different opinions, even over dinner, and that will be it was very, very nice, at least to me. I took a lot from this conference, and I'm glad that you are all here. And we hope to do more of those, Daniel. Okay? Great.
I would like also to say thank you. And Fabio invited me, I think in April or May, to co-organize this conference here. And then I said, but I don't I don't study digital platforms. But then he said that those organizers, Anthony and Daniel, are professors at Marshall School of Business. And then I said, oh, then I will work on that. Because I did part of my PhD at Marshall back in 2001 and 2. So, and I am very grateful for that experience that I had there. So I'm very happy
And you did it in marketing?
Oh yeah, in the marketing department. Actually, I'm from the marketing department here.
The best field.
From the CB part. But I'd like to thank you all of you and the audience, those who still remain here, and also a special thank for the girls in the backstage and all the backstage operations of our school. And also Laila, who did a good job in doing all this very difficult job at FGV to organize all those things.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, yes.
Thank you, Daniel, Anthony. It's a good opportunity to organize this conference. Thank you for all the audience to stay here for 2 long days. I hope see all of you next year. I hope to continue this conference in Brazil. It's very, very, very good opportunity to discuss about the digital platforms here. I'm not agree with Fabio. Finance is the best field. We try to mix both areas in this conference. So very nice. Thank you for all. Thank you for coming.
We're finished. Thank you.
Thank you.